Chapter 791. Yiqing Luo raised her brows in interest as her slender fingers caressed her smooth lower jaw. It turned out that old grandmadam had found out about Yiqing Qian's pregnancy. Thinking about it, she said that Yiqing Qian was pregnant in front of thousands of people at the academy's entrance and guessed the father of this child. This news naturally spread like wildfire. Moreover, Yiqing Qian had not only lost her chastity in front of the old minister and second prince, but in front of thousands of people. Everyone saw it clearly. How could old madam, who had always cherished her reputation, tolerate this? Otherwise, old madam would not have expressed goodwill to her time and time again. She even personally brought her mother's memorial tablet over. Vile spawn! Vile spawn! Yi Tianquang's furious voice was extremely loud. How could my Yi family raise such a shameless girl like you? This child is already 2 months old. How could it be second princess? Yiqing Qian only sobbed softly. No matter what, this child, Yiqing Qian could only push it to Lung Fengying. Otherwise, not to mention that this child could not be kept. Even her life would probably be killed by Yi Tianquang in order to wash away the Yi family's humiliation. Eldest young miss, this matter is not a small matter. If this reaches the monarch, it will not be easy to clean up. Lady Baiming's voice was gentle. Yi Tianquang heard that and immediately flew into a rage as he quickly walked to the bedside and grabbed Yiqing Qian's clothes. Vile spawn, tell me quickly, whose child is in your womb? Yiqing Luo laughed lightly. This Lady Baiming was indeed an intelligent lady. She looked as though she was worried for the Yi family, but in actual fact, she had grasped Yi Tianquang's thoughts. Yi Tianquang was most concerned about his current status. How would he dare to offend the current monarch? If it was eldest Prince Lung Fenghua's child, Yi Tianquang could still directly hand the child over to the monarch, and on account of the child, send Yiqing Qian to King Ping's fief. But if this child was Lung Fengying's, which meant that after Yiqing Qian snatched her sister's fiancé, she also hooked up with second prince at the same time. This was the royal family scandal. Right now, in the entire royal family, only second Prince Lung Fengying was able to assume the position of crown prince. If this scandal were to spread, if Lung Fengying really became the crown prince, not only would the civil and military officials not be able to accept it, even the commoners would not be able to accept such a crown prince as their future monarch. This could easily cause panic in the Western continent. If the monarch were to find out about this, he would definitely punish the Yi clan and push all the blame onto the Yi clan in order to protect the royal family's reputation. As for Yiqing Qian's thoughts, Yiqing Luo was very clear about it. He admitted that the child was Lung Fenghua's. Yiqing Qian would definitely be sent to King Ping's fief. Lung Fenghua's personality, after he had fallen this time, he had completely darkened. If he were to see Yiqing Qian, this woman who had betrayed him, how would he treat her? He was afraid that Yiqing Qian's life would be worse than death. As for the child in her belly, would Lung Fenghua believe that it was his? On the contrary, they could only grab onto Lung Fengying, this life-saving straw, tightly in order to have a chance of survival. If Lung Fengying wanted to give up this chess piece of his, Yiqing Qian would definitely rather die in glory than live in disgrace. Insisting that this child was Lung Fengying's, Lung Fengying could forget about becoming the crown prince properly. Yiqing Qian had probably never thought that there would be a day where she would end up in such a state. If she wanted to blame, she could only blame her cheap mouth. Lung Fengying had probably never thought that he had schemed for so many years, just for a chance to climb up, but now his most fatal weakness was held by a woman. If she wanted to blame, she could only blame him for being greedy. Chapter 792. Yiqing Luo's chuckle attracted the attention of the people in the room. Old Seven, you're back. Grandma will accompany you for dinner in a while. Old Grandmadam's stern face softened when she saw Yiqing Luo. Yi Tianquang's face was ashen. Looking at Yiqing Luo's eyes, although not as gentle as old Grandmadam's, there was no longer the disgust and hatred in the past. He just nodded lightly. It's good that you're back. Go to the hall and wait. The family will have a good meal later." Their gentle words were indeed a great stimulus to the delicate woman lying on the bed. Since when did the people in the family try to please her like this? Even when she sacrificed everything to hook up with Lung Feng Hua and obediently followed all their arrangements. Old Grandmadam had never tried to please her. Her father had never tried to please her. Yi Qing Luo didn't do anything. No, Yi Qing Luo ruined her. It was Yi Qing Luo who ruined her, but she received Old Grandmadam and Lord Father's flattery and gentleness? Why? Why was she the one who was abandoned? Yi Qing Qian's hateful gaze was like a poisonous snake, entangling Yi Qing Luo. She hated Yi Qing Luo. She hated Yi Qing Luo for taking everything away from her, hated Yi Qing Luo for destroying everything. If she really died, before she died, she must bring Yi Qing Luo to hell. How could Yi Qing Luo not feel the strong hatred? Yi Qing Luo calmly and indifferently met Yi Qing Qian's hateful gaze. The smile on her lips deepened. Eldest sister has been abandoned by the second prince? She didn't care about the presence of Old Grandmadam and Yi Tianquang around and slowly walked to the bedside. Old Grandmadam and Yi Tianquang didn't stop her. When Yi Qing Luo came to the courtyard, they put on a show of completely abandoning Yi Qing Qian. Wasn't it for Yi Qing Luo to see? They naturally wouldn't let Yi Qing Luo leave like this. Yi Qing Qian trembled and shrank back. Her eyes were full of fear. "You, what do you want to do?" Yi Qing Luo just stopped by the bedside, slightly leaned over, half squinted her charming eyes, narrow and long and charming. "What can I do? I just want to take a good look at big sister who looks like a stray dog." She chuckled, her charming eyes roaming, unable to conceal the ridicule. Big sister always thought that she was the real chess player. Now, as an abandoned chess piece, what does big sister think? "You." Yi Qing Qian's eyes widened, filled with hatred. "Yi Qing, fall." Eldest sister is not only abandoned by the second prince. Yi Qing Luo's body slowly moved closer to Yi Qing Qian's ear. The chilly voice was like a chilly wind, following Yi Qing Qian's eardrums straight into her heart. Even the Yi family has given up on eldest sister. Yi Qing Qian was so angry that her whole body was trembling. Suddenly, Yi Qing Qian's entire face turned pale as she clutched her chest with one hand and pressed her abdomen with the other. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows raised slightly as she revealed a treacherous sneer. In the blink of an eye, the silhouette beside Yi Qing Qian's ear was already standing at the door of the room. At the same time, Yi Qing Qian spurted out a mouthful of blood. In that blood, there was actually a piece of minced meat. She was so angry that she spat out the blood in her heart. Yi Qing Qian lay weakly on the bed, her resentful and hateful gaze locked on Yi Qing Luo. "Yi Qing Luo, even if I become a ghost, I will not let you off." She tore her throat, sharp and resentful. Like a curse, it went straight into Yi Qing Luo's eardrums. Chapter 793. However, standing at the door, the cursed main character glanced at her with a faint smile. "Elder sister, you can't do anything to me as a human, let alone as a ghost." After speaking, Yi Qing Luo no longer cared about Yi Qing Qian's unwillingness and hatred. She turned around and left Yi Qing Qian's room. For a woman like Yi Qing Qian, her heart and worldview had long lost the existence of the three views. To Yi Qing Qian, she only felt that everything that she had done was right and proper, and those who disobeyed her and stopped her were not tolerated by heaven and earth. Yi Qing Qian was jealous of Yi Qing Luo's position as the first wife's daughter, jealous that Yi Qing Luo could be engaged to Lung Feng Hua and become the future crown princess. Therefore, she humiliated Yi Qing Luo, framed her, and even snatched Lung Feng Hua to prove that she was stronger than the first wife's daughter. But Yi Qing Qian had never thought about it. Was the first wife's daughter what Yi Qing Luo wanted? Moreover, even if Yi Qing Luo was the first wife's daughter, wasn't Yi Qing Luo's life more miserable than a servant's? At least Yi Qian had a mother who loved her dearly and a father who loved her. Even the cold and sinister old ancestor loved her. What else could she not be satisfied with? It was just Yi Qian's own greed. But she had to put all the blame on herself. All of this, Yi Qian only had herself to blame and no one else. In the hall, the table was full of delicacies. Yi Luo lazily leaned on the soft chair and slowly ate the food. On the opposite side, the three people looked at each other. After a while, Yi Tianquang couldn't help but put down the chopsticks in his hand and carefully looked at Yi Luo. Luo, you must be tired during these days in the academy. Father knows the academy is on vacation and specially asked for a few days to accompany you at home. Yi Luo's action of eating didn't have the slightest pause. She just lazily lifted her eyelids and glanced at Yi Tianquang. This glance made Yi Tianquang tremble all over. An inexplicable chill ran down his spine. Yi Tianquang rubbed his eyes and looked carefully again. Yi Luo had already lowered her head and didn't look at him again. Wherever you want to go to play, Father will accompany you. Yi Tianquang took a deep breath, calmed down the shock in his heart, and maintained the kind expression on his face. Yi Luo's lips curled into an arc of ridicule as she lazily raised her arm to support half of her face. Her smile was extremely lazy, but it also added a bit of liveliness. Her tone was extremely casual, which made her seem even more like a hooligan. Father, shouldn't you reprimand me for making eldest sister's pregnancy known to the world like before? Are you reprimanding me for stripping big sister's clothes in public and ruining the Three Springs sex reputation? The smile on Yi Tianquang's face froze. Old Madam stared at Yi Luo with a chilly gaze. Both of their hearts trembled violently. When Yi Luo saw that, she giggled. Looks like father and old ancestors still blame me. No, that's not it. Yi Tianquang abruptly stood up, his face somewhat embarrassed. In the past, it was all father's fault. Father listened to Madame Yuqi, that jealous woman's words. Listen to your eldest sister's slanderous words. Thousands of mistakes, it's all father's fault. Although his words were unceasingly admitting his wrongs and almost fawning. But his tone was extremely cold, extremely dry. As the saying goes, how can a father and daughter have overnight enmity? Old Madam timely opened her mouth. We're all one family. What's in the past is in the past. In the future, whether it's me or your father, we'll all stand on your side. His words sounded even better than a song. Stand by her side? Chapter 794. Seeing that Yi Luo remained silent for a long time, Old Grandmadam continued. Old 7, I heard that you were assigned to the Devil class in the Heavenly Academy, the class that is known as Waste. Yi Luo's fingers dangled the chopsticks and looked at Old Grandmadam with a faint smile. Yes. On the day you go to the Heavenly Academy, Grandma will go with you and ask the dean to assign you to the low profound class. Old Grandmadam smiled gently. No matter what, you are the daughter of the Yi family and your strength is not bad. How can you stay in the same class with that group of waste? As for Yi Luo's matter in the Heavenly Academy, in order to protect her own position, she naturally would not reveal a word to the Yi family. Yi Fengyu also felt that the Yi family was too biased towards his sister and felt unfair for his sister. How could he talk to these elders? In the eyes of the Yi family, Yi Luo was regarded as waste because of her poor performance, so she was assigned to the waste class. Old Grandmadam is right. Yi Tianquang leaned towards Yi Luo's direction with the expression of a doting father. You are my Yi Tianquang's daughter. No matter how poor your aptitude is, how low your profound grade is, how incompetent your ability is, you can still enter the low profound class. Obviously, he had forgotten how Yi Luo entered the Heavenly Academy. He had also forgotten that he himself had suffered a loss in the hands of Yi Luo. Luo is in the low profound class too, right? Yi Tianquang seemed to have found a reason to belittle Yi Luo. His mood lightened up a little. The smile between his eyebrows also died with some sincerity. Don't worry, although your aptitude is not as good as you were, Father and old grandmadam will do our best to let you be in the same class as you are. Look, this tone, it sounds more like charity than charity, right? As if Yi Ching Luo was able to enter the Heavenly Academy. It was also because of Yi Tian Kuang. The bamboo chopsticks in Yi Ching Luo's hand, along with the swaying, left her fingers and fell on the table. Coincidentally, the bamboo chopsticks fell into the soup, splashing drops of soup onto Yi Tian Kuang's face. Boiling soup, just a few drops, it didn't hurt. But that kind of greasy feeling rolled down his face drop by drop. His nose was full of greasy soup smell. Yi Tian Kuang's complexion immediately darkened like charcoal. Just as he was about to slam the table and stand up to berate Yi Ching Luo for not knowing what's good for her, he heard an elegant laughter coming from outside the door. Father's words are wrong. Your words are wrong. After that, a refined young man in a bamboo-colored robe walked over slowly with a warm appearance. His footsteps were casual as he walked to the dining table and pulled out a chair as he sat down beside Yi Ching Luo. When did you return? Seeing the man, Yi Tian Kuang's face immediately revealed a happy expression. Even the elder ancestor, who had always been sinister and taciturn, revealed joy from the bottom of his heart. This man was none other than the second young master of the Yi clan, Yi Fengru, who was known as the steward of the Yi clan. I just came back. Yi Fengru poured himself a cup of tea and took a sip. The smile on his face didn't diminish. I didn't expect that as soon as I returned, I would see Lord Father making fun of seventh younger sister. At the mention of Yi Ching Luo, the happiness on Yi Tian Kuang's face froze. He lifted his sleeves and wiped his face, wiping away that greasy touch. Making fun? Yi Fengru was slightly startled and immediately looked at Yi Ching Luo meaningfully. Seventh younger sister didn't tell Lord Father and old ancestor about your own deeds? Yi Ching Luo's slender brows slightly raised as she met his pair of warm eyes. Her eyes were covered with a faint layer of deep thought. Chapter 795. Yi Ching Luo's lips curled up slightly. The smile on her face was the kind of innocence and sweetness that someone of her age should have. Second brother. Her sweet voice was crisp and pleasing to the ear. Yi Tian Kuang and old grandmadam were stunned. One must know that ever since Yi Ching Luo returned, they had been thinking of ways and means to please her, but they didn't get any good words from her. Yi Fengru smiled more elegantly. Seventh sister. Last time, Yi Fengyu had been deliberately humiliated by Madame Yuqi and had knelt to the point where his legs were almost crippled. Yi Fengru had appeared and said a few words to help Yi Fengyu, giving him the best opportunity for treatment. No matter what purpose Yi Fengru had, he helped her, that was the truth. If there were no other accidents, Yi Ching Luo would choose the right time to repay him. Second brother. What did you just say about seventh brother? The great ancestor frowned slightly. He kept thinking about what Yi Fengru had just said. It seemed to be hinting at something to Yi Ching Luo. Yi Fengru slowly leaned back, looking calm and smiling. Old grandmadam and father wants seventh sister to enter Earth Profound Class 1? Old grandmadam nodded. Devil class is not suitable. She wanted to say not suitable for the Yi family's reputation. But when she saw Yi Ching Luo's smiling face, she immediately changed her words. Devil class is not suitable for seventh sister. Even if her strength is not enough, low profound class 1 is more than enough. Puffed, Yi Fengru laughed loudly. His face, which was as gentle as jade, appeared even more carefree and casual. Old grandmadam and Yi Tian Kuang had long been used his character and didn't say anything. Yi Fengru waved the fan in his hand. His laughter became more wanton. Seventh sister doesn't even look at the class of gods, not to mention low profound class 1. When these words came out, old grandmadam and Yi Tian Kuang were stunned. What did these words mean? Not even looking at the class of gods. Did Yi Ching Luo have the qualifications to enter the class of gods? Seventh younger sister is an influential figure in the Heavenly Academy. 2 of the best instructors in the academy had jointly written a petition to the dean to allow seventh younger sister to enter the class of gods. Speaking of this, Yifeng Ru turned his head and took a deep look at Yiqing Luo, who was squinting her eyes and staring at him, as he laughed even louder. Director also had the intention to send Seventh Sister to the class of gods, but was rejected by Seventh Sister. With a pong sound, the chair Yi Tianquang was sitting on fell to the ground. Yi Tianquang looked at Yiqing Luo incredulously, his face full of astonishment. The elder ancestor couldn't believe what he was hearing. However, these words came from Yifeng Ru's mouth. These words came from the mouth of their second son, grandson, whom they had always trusted and loved. It had to be 100% truth. Yiqing Luo, class of gods? And he even refused? Since when did Yiqing Luo have such a powerful ability? Yiqing Luo's half-squinted eyes slowly surfaced a layer of frost. He listened to Yifeng Ru tell him everything about his school. She was surprised, but on second thought, she felt relieved. Yifeng Ru's aptitude would definitely be able to enter the Heavenly Academy. It should be intermediate class 2 or high-class students. What made her curious was that she had never heard of Yifeng Ru's name in the academy. It was reasonable to say that this second brother of hers, whether it was his background, appearance, or ability, should be outstanding in the eyes of the students. Facing Yiqing Luo's curious gaze, Yifeng Ru only curled his lips, revealing a warm smile. Yiqing Luo's slender eyebrows gently knitted. Chapter 796. Yiqing Luo's heart trembled fiercely. Her eyes widened as she stood up and pointed at Yifeng Ru. "It's you." "Yes, it's him." In the eyes of the academy's students, Devil Class was the symbol of waste. As the class monitor of Intermediate Profound Class 2, how could Xie Yin suddenly help Shangwan Luli to challenge Devil Class? If it wasn't for someone's intentional guidance, Xie Yin would absolutely look down on Devil Class. And when Xie Yin left, the brother Ru that he kept mumbling about, wasn't it referring to Yifeng Ru? Which meant Xie Yin's challenge to Devil Class was under Yifeng Ru's orders. But why? Why did Yifeng Ru do this? I'm curious, a talented person like Seventh Sister, why is she willing to stay in Devil Class, which is known as waste? Yifeng Ru rubbed his chin as he smiled warmly. The truth has proven that my guess is right. Even the class of gods is unable to attract Seventh Sister to leave. It can be seen that Devil Class must have some extraordinary magical power. This man's sensitivity was a little too strong. All the mysteries, I think. The interclass competition 7 months later will be revealed. Yifeng Ru smiled as his fingers that were tapping on the table became lighter. This second brother of hers was not an ordinary person. Seeing Yi Tianquang, an old madam, wanting to ask her about the class of gods. Yiqing Luo got up directly and left the hall without saying a word. At night, Yiqing Luo gave Ziling acupuncture treatment and confirmed that Ziling's leg was healing at an extremely fast speed before she was relieved. She passed Hong Mei 3 days' worth of medicinal herbs and reminded Ziling that she could get off the bed tomorrow and do her recovery on her own. Finally, she passed Ziling a profound qi mental cultivation method and sword manual and rushed over to the old mansion. The old mansion was brightly lit and 90 over mercenaries were sitting in the hall, discussing something solemnly. Yiqing Luo had just reached the hall when Long Yunjian handed over a stack of neatly arranged information. Yiqing Luo received it and sat down beside Long Yunjian. She lowered her head and casually flipped through the information. It was all about the background information of the tomb, as well as some mechanisms and arrays outside the tomb. The first piece of information made Yiqing Luo take a few more glances. The delicate handwriting was obviously written by Peach. The ink was still wet, so he must have written it not long ago. The general content was, other than the World Group, there was another mercenary group who had also asked the 3,000 peach blossoms for information on King Ling's tomb. He heard that he had also accepted a mission in the Ling King's tomb, so he would probably bump into Yiqing Luo and the others. This wasn't the main thing that attracted Yiqing Luo's attention. Instead, that mercenary corps was a gold medal mercenary corps. Gold medal. This also meant that this mercenary group was powerful and had a high status in the mercenary world. When they set out, there was basically no mission that they could not complete. If their mission was the same as that gold medal mercenary group's, they would definitely not be able to compete with the gold mercenary group. Vice leader, if it's a gold-ranked mercenary group, we have no chance of winning. Tong Ziqing frowned as she looked at Yiqing Luo. Just now, they had been discussing this issue. It was not a wise move to snatch something from a gold medal mercenary group. Moreover, it was very likely that he would incur the wrath of the gold-ranked mercenary group. By then, it would definitely affect the world group's development. Because of this, they had been waiting for Yiqing Luo's idea. Chapter 797. The main hall fell into a state of silence. Quite a number of mercenaries' faces surfaced a look of shame. Yiqing Luo smiled faintly. The motive of establishing a mercenary group isn't for the mission, but to train everyone better. She propped up her head as her expression didn't have much fluctuation of emotions. The real motive of heading to King Ling's tomb is to train you on how to deal with any situation and not to complete the so-called mission. Of course, if you're able to complete the mission, then that's the best. If you're not able to complete it, but if you're able to learn something from the mission, then it's worth it. After Yiqing Luo finished her words, her half-squinted eyes slowly swept past those mercenaries who lowered their heads in silence. The entire main hall's atmosphere was extremely cold. After a long while, Yiqing Luo softened her tone as she spoke word by word. I want you to remember one point. The motive of us doing missions isn't to complete the mission, but in the process of completing the mission, we're training ourselves, tempering ourselves, and obtaining improvement. This is the most important prerequisite for us to complete the mission. Yiqing Luo didn't wish for her own bunch of brothers to be like the other mercenary groups, to become mission machines. To tell the truth, towards these mercenary groups' missions, whether they were able to complete it or not, wasn't especially important to Yiqing Luo. What she cared about was these brothers, in the process of completing the mission. What did they learn and what did they improve? The young mercenaries slowly raised their heads, and after looking at Yiqing Luo for some time, they nodded their heads vigorously as they responded in unison, yes. Zhao Bo and the others who were standing by the side also had a smile in their eyes. Indeed, their choice wasn't wrong. The world group was indeed different from the other groups. The world group perhaps wouldn't be the best developed group, but it was the most heartwarming group. This was a home, a real home. Yiqing Luo's lips curled up slightly as the expression on her face became extremely gentle. Everyone rest early. We'll be setting off early tomorrow morning, and we must use our best spirit to receive tomorrow's challenge. Yes, Vice Group Leader. The young mercenaries stood upright. Yiqing Luo glanced sideways at Long Yunzhan, Xiao Jin, and the others as she stood up and looked at the brothers. I'll remind you one last time. No matter what happens tomorrow, just act according to your capabilities. The world group doesn't need people who fight with their lives on the line, but we need people who are obedient. The young mercenaries nodded. After the youths dispersed, only Long Yunzhan, Xiao Jin, and the others remained in the entire hall. What do you think about the Ling King's tomb mission? Long Yunzhan asked expressionlessly. Yiqing Luo had specially asked them to stay behind, so there must be something regarding the mission that she wanted to tell them. Yiqing Luo pinched her eyebrows and put the stack of information back in her hands. What kind of team is that gold-ranked mercenary group? Did Peach mention it? Their gazes all focused on Xiao Jin. However, he saw that Xiao Jin's expression was a little unnatural. His gaze suddenly met Long Yunzhan's, and then he subconsciously looked away. When it finally landed on Yin Xiao Yi snorted softly and looked away. Xiao Jin opened his mouth. He pursed his lips tightly and lowered his eyes, not saying a word. Yiqing Luo looked suspiciously at the both of them. Recalling Peach's sly smile, she couldn't help but gave a light cough. Could it be? When the two of them went to the 3,000 Peach Blossom group to buy information about the Ling King's tomb, they met Peach, and then something unspeakable happened? Chapter 798. It's the Death God Mercenary Group. Xiao Jin took some time before he opened his mouth weakly. Finishing his words, his vision shot towards Yin Xiaoyi's direction as his thin lips tightened. Yiqing Luo temporarily kept her curiosity and gossip as she lowered her eyelids and looked at the information in her hands. Death God Mercenary Group. She had heard of this name before. It should be said that she had seen this mercenary group's name on the Mercenary Association's honor board. Gold-ranked Mercenary Association, which was ranked third on the honor board. The number of over 9,000 people, and all of them were Nirvana Realms elites. Among them, there were close to 500 alchemists and 500 armament masters. This was a real large-scale powerhouse. Death God Mercenary Group's group leader's name was the sky mystic Overlord who had the highest hopes in Nirvana Realm, Zhong Zheng Sihan. The eldest young master of the Zhong family, who was the leader of the East Continent's cultivators, was a genius child since young, and when he grew up, he did not disappoint. Now that he was just 25 years old, his name had already spread far and wide, and he had even established his own force. After this mercenary group's name was revealed, even Long Yunzhan's expression changed slightly. Following Death God Mercenary Group to Ling King's tomb, wouldn't it reduce the danger? Yiqing Luo looked at their solemn expressions as she consoled them. Death God Mercenary Group won't put us in their eyes. On the contrary, we can borrow their strength to go deeper into the tomb. Everyone broke out in cold sweat. Were they sure? That would be so smooth? Yiqing Luo suddenly put on a serious expression. I'm very clear about the dangers in Ling King's tomb. Even if God Thief follows along, I'm not assured so. No matter what happens, I hope you can protect everyone, and if the situation is not right, immediately evacuate. Long Yunzhan frowned as he gazed deeply at her. You intend to go alone? Not necessarily. Yiqing Luo interrupted his words. I won't joke around with my own life. If it was really dangerous, it might harm their brothers' lives, so the world group must evacuate. After that, she would observe the situation before deciding if she should go alone. Perhaps she could follow the Death God Mercenary Group to the place where the Corpse King was guarded. Whether she could complete the mission or not, it was up to fate. The few of them exchanged glances but didn't say a word. Yiqing Luo didn't open her mouth as she placed all her attention on the information in her hands, memorizing all the information regarding Ling King's tomb into her mind. The next day, the group went to the Ling King's tomb. It was not even 5 o'clock in the morning when the group set off. They walked until noon before they arrived at the tomb of the Ling King. The location of the Ling King's tomb was extremely remote, at the edge of the primal chaos realm. If he was the slightest bit careless, it was very likely that he would miss the location of the Ling King's tomb and directly enter the chaotic realm. It was all because of Yiqing Luo, who had memorized all the information about the Ling King's tomb. Following the outer perimeter map provided by Peach, the group of them stood safely at the entrance of the Ling King's tomb. Just as Holy Pirate had said, there were mountains surrounding them and a flood dragon outside. It was extremely dangerous. Even though they were standing outside the tomb, they could still feel the bone-chilling aura slowly approaching them. It made people shiver continuously, and goosebumps appeared on their skin. Around the entrance, there were still water droplets dripping from the stalactites. The dripping sound of water added a tinge of ear-piercing and treacherous to this appalling atmosphere. Some of the youngsters were already trembling slightly as their expressions turned steely green. Zhao Bo, who was standing in front, looked at the entrance of the tomb as his brows creased. Group leader, vice group leader, are we waiting for the Death God Mercenary Group or going in first? Chapter 799. If the Death God Mercenary Group entered King Ling's tomb first, they would definitely send someone to guard the entrance of the tomb, not allowing other mercenary groups or tomb robbers to enter. Being in a high position, especially for a mercenary group like them who were ranked third on the honor board, there would definitely be many people who would take the opportunity to give them a fatal blow while they were on a mission. Because of this, if they waited for the Death God Mercenary Group to arrive, they might be treated as a killer group with ill intentions. Not only would they attract the Death God Mercenary Group's suspicions, they might not even have the chance to enter King Ling's tomb. This was the reason why Yiqing Luo urged the youngsters to set off early in the morning. If they met in the tomb, the Death God mercenary group would only think of their small team as a group of children who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth and were not afraid of death. Yiqing Luo called out Shi Ju and asked it to search around. As for herself, she released her perception and led the youngsters towards the entrance of King Ling's tomb. The nearer they got, the more they sensed a damp smell along with the Yin wind. That smell was extremely strange as it filled their nostrils with a musty stench, making one's stomach churn. Yiqing Luo's brows creased. Even though she had been on countless of bloody corpses on the battlefield and had smelled all kinds of corpse stench, towards this smell, she was not used to it. The brothers behind her would probably find it harder to adapt. Her fingertips swept across the profound phoenix ring, and a palm-sized jade box appeared in her palm. Yiqing Luo passed the box over. Everyone swallow one pill before entering. The box was passed down one by one, and after those youngsters swallowed the pill, that pungent, moldy smell instantly disappeared, and their noses were filled with a refreshing smell. Yiqing Luo didn't bother about the youngsters' dumbstruck expressions. This was the fresh air pill which she had refined through the night. The corpse chi in the tomb was dense, and as it was in the dark all year round, the air would definitely not circulate well. If one was slightly careless, it was possible to be corroded by the yin qi. Hence, she specially refined this kind of low-grade medicinal pill, which was of little value. The few of them had just stepped into the tomb entrance when Xiao Jin and Yin Xiao carried two huge luminous pearls as they walked at the front. Tong Ziqing and Long Yunzhan walked at the back. The entire pitch-black cave became much brighter. The tomb's rock walls were still dripping with water. It was cold and smooth to the touch, extremely disgusting. If it weren't for the fact that these youths couldn't smell this stench, they would have probably vomited by now. However, the strange totem that was outlined on the dripping rock walls, as well as the feeling of yin qi assaulting them, made them feel an inexplicable sense of irritation. More than 90 people walked with trepidation for about the time it took for half an incense stick to burn. Yiqing Luo suddenly stopped in her tracks. Her gaze was fixed on a certain spot, and her expression suddenly became cold. Gather. Be careful. The 90 or so mercenaries immediately moved closer to their brothers, looking around vigilantly with a serious expression on their faces. After a moment of silence, the surroundings were quiet. Apart from their breathing, there was no other sound. The youths remained vigilant. Yiqing Luo slowly walked past Xiao Jin and walked to the front as her gaze swept across the surrounding rock walls. Her half-squinted, charming eyes, in this strange tomb, seemed especially gloomy and cold. The corners of her mouth curled into a cold smile. She moved her 5 fingers, and a red feather fan appeared on her fingertips like a flame. You have the guts to follow, but don't have the guts to show yourself. Her words had just ended when Yiqing Luo's figure suddenly swayed, and in a blink of an eye, she seemed to have blended into the air. Immediately after, Yiqing Luo's figure appeared beside one of the rock walls, and her 5 fingers pinched the top of the rock wall. Chapter 800. When the rock wall was peeled off, there were hands, legs, and also a head. His neck was pressed against by Yiqing Luo's feather fan. The youngsters were instantly shocked as they looked at the person in Yiqing Luo's hand who was like a rock wall. Following that, the crowd reacted swiftly as they looked at the surrounding rock walls, staring at those strange contours of the rock walls. Xiao Jin and the others had already leapt up as they speedily pounced towards the direction of those rock walls. No wonder when they entered the tomb, their hearts felt extremely uneasy and inexplicably gloomy. It turned out that ever since they entered the tomb, they had been targeted. Xiao Jin and the others moved, and those rock wall people who were attached to the rock walls also gave up on their disguise. One by one, they flew out from the rock walls and directly charged towards the 90 over young mercenaries. Luckily, these youngsters had already been trained by Yiqing Luo and the others, and their reaction speed was extremely fast. At the instance when the rock wall people charged over, the young mercenaries swiftly got into formation as they swiftly drew out their own weapons and retaliated. It looked like these rock wall people totally didn't care about their comrade's life and death. Or perhaps the person in her hand was merely a small fry. Yiqing Luo's fingers locked onto the person in her hand as her feather fan curled slightly, drawing a beautiful arc. Her fingers opened up and the rock wall softly fell beneath her feet as fresh blood mixed with the wet soil on the ground. Following that, Yiqing Luo's feet moved as she dashed into this chaotic battle. There were around 20 over rock wall people, and their bodies were plastered on the rock wall as a disguise, but it didn't affect their battle agility at all. Their teamwork was also very orderly. Every move seemed to be compatible with their companions. It was extremely natural. Their attacks were extremely ferocious. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes, and after a few twists and turns, she landed next to Zhao Bo. Zhao Bo, these people's skills don't look like an ordinary organization. To put it more accurately, they didn't look like professional killers from the killer hall. Their skills and moves, as well as the degree of tacit coordination, on the contrary. It seemed like a certain team. I discovered it too. Zhao Bo raised his leg and fiercely kicked away a cliff man that was pouncing towards him. His face was slightly pale. The opponent is very strong. At the very least, his profound rank should be above Mystic Profound rank 3, and his moves are very direct. Indeed, when she saw the ambush, Yiqing Luo's first reaction was, these people were the killers sent by Shangguan Liuli. But after fighting for a while, Yiqing Luo had completely dispelled this idea. Shangguan Liuli, Yin Zhan, and Jitsong Tian, these three people absolutely didn't have such a powerful trump card. Otherwise, they would have taken it out long ago as their capital to flaunt their prowess. Could they be from the Blood Demon group? Or the two of them were discussing when suddenly that rock wall man who was kicked away under the support of his comrade suddenly made a turn and directly attacked towards Yiqing Luo's direction. Yiqing Luo's eyes turned cold as she swiftly retreated. However, he was still a step too late. The Rockman's 5 fingers had already locked onto Yiqing Luo's wrist. Yiqing Luo flipped the feather fan in her right hand and swiftly struck towards the Rockman's head. That rock wall man wasn't afraid at all as he directly clasped Yiqing Luo's left index finger as his fingertip moved slightly. However, in the next second, the Rockman was dumbfounded. Even though his face was disguised by the rock wall, it couldn't conceal the other party's expression. Yiqing Luo's left index finger was encircled by a demonic red glow as the profound phoenix ring stuck onto her skin tightly. No matter how much strength the rock wall man used, it was unable to make the profound phoenix ring show any signs of falling off. Yiqing Luo's gaze instantly turned serene. Chapter 801. The rock wall man crashed onto the sharp rock wall with a bang. Those sharp stones pierced right through the rock wall man's heart. Yiqing Luo lowered her eyes and looked at the profound phoenix ring on her finger. The other party's motive was the profound phoenix ring. After finding out the destination of her mission, they specially disguised it as a rock wall, just to snatch the profound phoenix ring when she was unprepared. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes as she thought of the rock wallman's skills and chemistry that Zhao Bo had analyzed. Could it be? Not Godless Island's people. A lowly voice with an extremely cold tone came from behind him. That pink dumpling unknowingly stood behind her. Its empty and soundless eyes gazed at Yiqing Luo as it repeated word by word. Not Godless Island. Yiqing Luo's expression changed. Not Godless Island. In her memory, there was only that one time when Godless Island sent out the 3 evils to snatch her profound phoenix ring. Other than Godless Island, who else would be interested in the profound phoenix ring? Could it be that the news of her possessing the profound phoenix ring had been leaked out? No, it couldn't be. If the Overlord's profound phoenix ring fell into the hands of a frail young lady, it would definitely be snatched by numerous high-leveled cultivators who didn't want to possess the Overlord's divine relic. Moreover, Mo Yu Ying's appearance and Godless Island seemed to have some kind of unexplainable relationship. When she first met Godless Island's 3 evils, she met Mo Yu Ying. Today, the moment she thought of whether these people were from Godless Island, Mo Yu-ing immediately denied it. How could Mo Yu-ing be so sure? Qing Luo, you have the soul-chasing powder on you. Long Yunzhan's cold voice revealed a hint of solemnity. He swiftly went forward and grabbed Yi Qing Luo's arm. He saw a green glow on Yi Qing Luo's elbow, faintly flashing. If one didn't look closely, it was impossible to detect. Yi Qing Luo's fingertip brushed past that green glow, and indeed a thin layer of powder was swept off. Her half-squinted eyes, under the illumination of the luminous pearl, were suffused with a faint cold glint. The soul-chasing powder, as the name suggested, would chase the soul to the ends of the earth, relentlessly following it. It was used to track a person's whereabouts. He only needed to sprinkle a bit of soul-chasing powder, and he would be able to track that person for up to 3 days. As for the soul-chasing powder, it would melt upon contact with water. The person who had been poisoned by it would not even notice it. Who were you in contact with last night? Long Yunzhan asked solemnly. Last night, after leaving the Three Springs sect, she went straight to the old house. Wait a minute. Three Springs sect? Yi Fengru. Yes, at the dinner table yesterday, Yi Fengru sat next to her. No wonder he had inexplicably mentioned her situation in the academy to Yi Tianquang and the old ancestor, and even told them about her refusal to enter the class of gods. This method was clearly to let Yi Tianquang and the elder ancestor's attitude affect her emotions, and then take the opportunity to sprinkle soul-chasing powder on her arm. What was his purpose in doing this? Why would he want to know her whereabouts? Could it be that the ambush by the rockmen had something to do with Yi Fengru? Yi Qing Luo's eyes turned increasingly gloomy and cold. She casually wiped the dripping water on the rock wall and dissolved the soul-chasing powder on her arm. Where her vision was fixed on the rockmen again, her lips suddenly curled into a chilly smile. The feather fan in her hand was like a dancing red flame, constantly blooming the most beautiful fireworks. Her action was extremely fast. The target of these rockmen was originally to snatch the profound phoenix ring. But for some reason, the profound phoenix ring could not be removed from Yi Qing Luo's hand. Chapter 802. These youngsters were able to see through all their attacks in the shortest time possible, and after pondering for a few breaths, they were able to come up with a set of methods to restrain them. Their power of understanding and potential was simply too shocking. Immediately, one of the rock wall men decided to retreat. But unexpectedly, just as he said this word, a gust of chilly wind struck him. The rock wall man had not regained his senses when a tight, icy cold sensation pressed against his neck. By the side of his ear was a young lady's enchanting laughter. Who are you? To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. This was an unchanging logic since ancient times. These people didn't care about their comrades' lives, so the only way was to ferret out the leader among them. Indeed, those 10 over-rock wall men who were still alive all stopped their attacks and gathered together as they stared vigilantly at Yi Qing Luo's direction. That rock wall man didn't seem to have expected that he would be suppressed so easily. That red feather fan on his neck seemed to have no lethality at all, but the higher-ups had specially instructed him to be careful of the red feather fan in Yi Qing Luo's hands. The rock wall man didn't dare to move. He didn't say a word, and Yi Qing Luo was neither anxious nor impatient. She calmly flicked her fingers, and the red feather fan cut open the rock wall, which the rock wall man had disguised himself as it stuck close to his skin, leaving a shallow mark. Fresh blood oozed out. There's someone else in the tomb. Who actually entered Ling Ling King's tomb before us? Damn it. Thinking of how dangerous Ling Ling King's tomb was, no one dared to explore, so we didn't send anyone over to guard last night. I didn't expect. Forget it. Let's go over and take a look first. The voices of several people came from the direction of the entrance of the tomb. Their voices weren't soft and sounded extremely spacious. Yi Qing Luo was slightly stunned as a glint flashed past her eyes. The Death God mercenary groups, men, had arrived. Just as Yi Qing Luo was looking at the tomb entrance, the rock wall man on her wrist took the opportunity when she wasn't prepared and struck towards Yi Qing Luo's chest. Following that, his entire body squatted down. Yiqing Luo acutely sensed the danger and swiftly evaded, giving the rock wall man a chance to escape. But in a blink of an eye, that bunch of rock wall men drilled into the tomb entrance and disappeared without a trace. Trying to escape, Xiao Jin's expression changed greatly, and he was about to give chase. However, at the corner of the tomb, a group of people walked out and stopped them. A group of about 30 people came over. He was wearing a blue mercenary group uniform. The front and back of the clothes were embroidered with a large kill character using golden thread. Standing at the very front were two delicate-looking youths holding night-luminescent pearls. Then there were three people with extraordinary auras, 2 men and 1 woman. The expressions on their faces were almost cold. The most eye-catching person was the woman. She was so beautiful that she didn't seem like a mortal at all. Just a single glance at her would cause one to fall head over heels for her. After seeing this lady's looks, that whatever Three Springs City's #1 beauty, Yiqing Qian, whatever Southern Continent's beauty, Lanling Nua, had completely turned into dregs. The 2 men by her side, one hot and one cold, were like the woman's guardian deities. "Who are you people? Do you know what this place is? Who allowed you to come in?" A sharp and rude voice came from behind the 3 men. Yiqing Luo and the others then discovered that behind those 2 men, there was a 14 to 15-year-old delicate young lady. A series of questions bombarded down, making Yin Xiao, who wasn't in a good mood, frown tightly. "We haven't asked who you people are yet. Do you know what place this is? This is a tomb. Don't tell me this is your house. And you don't allow us to enter?" The youngsters couldn't help but burst out laughing. These words were simply too sarcastic. Chapter 803. "You." The young girl's face sunk as she pointed at Yin Xiao and said angrily, "Who do you think you are to actually dare to humiliate this young lady like this? Do you believe that I won't let my brother kill all of you?" When Yin Xiao heard this, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. Her beautiful eyes curved. "I've only heard of people relying on their fathers. This is the first time I've heard of someone relying on their brother. I don't have a brother. I'm so scared." Perhaps the girl was well protected and had never been treated like this. With just a few words, the girl's eyes reddened. "Xiao, Lin." 2 voices spoke at the same time. It came from Yiqing Luo and that otherworldly beauty opposite her. Their eyes met, and their gazes met for an instant. Yin Xiao gave a light harumph towards that side and kept her mouth shut as she returned to Yiqing Luo's side. On the other side, the girl who was called also shrunk back unwillingly. Yiqing Luo's expression turned slightly chilly as her charming eyes revolved with a chilly glint as she stared fixedly at the 2 men and 1 woman. "Hand them over." The beautiful woman frowned slightly. Her beautiful face was covered with a layer of worry that made people unable to help but worry. However, the woman's voice was extremely cold. "She's just a child who doesn't know any better. Why must you be so overbearing? You know what I'm talking about." Yiqing Luo's voice was even colder than her, and the sharp glint in her eyes was like a sharp blade. "Otherwise, I could suspect that your Death God mercenary group is in cahoots with those people." Long Yunzhan's expressionless face instantly darkened as his azure blue eyes flickered. "You mean, yes." Yiqing Luo responded calmly as her lips curled into a cold arc. If it wasn't for the appearance of the Death God mercenary group, that group of rock wall people wouldn't be able to escape so easily. The beautiful lady's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't open her mouth to stop Yiqing Luo. If that group of rock wall people wants to escape from the tomb, the only exit is the entrance of the tomb. Just now, it was the god-slaying mercenary group that came from the entrance. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into an increasingly chilly arc. As the 3rd place on the honor roll, would the Death God mercenary group let off any unknown person who ambushed them? The answer was absolutely impossible. On the other side, the god-slaying mercenary group remained silent. Yiqing Luo wasn't annoyed as she smiled. "I only have 2 guesses. First, those cliff men are from the god-slaying mercenary group, and the people who attacked us are from the god-slaying mercenary group. Secondly, the Death God mercenary group has a close relationship with the cliff people who attacked us." Silently waiting for Yiqing Luo to finish her sentence. That beautiful lady then curled her red lips and slowly took a step forward. Her attitude was still cold and arrogant. "Little girl, since you know who we are, you still dare to point your spear at us. Aren't you worried about affecting your mercenary group?" An irrelevant answer. Therefore, he changed the topic. "A threat?" Yi Qing Luo chuckled. "Since the Death God mercenary group doesn't dare to deny it, then it means that they have admitted what I said. Since the Death God mercenary group has already targeted my group, why should I worry about whether it will affect my group or not?" To tell the truth, Yi Qing Luo really hadn't thought about it. He would clash with the Killing God mercenary group right from the start. However, thinking about it, it made sense. She was able to find out from the 3,000 peach blossoms that the Death God mercenary group was going to King Ling's tomb for a mission. The Death God mercenary group naturally knew that the world group was going to King Ling's tomb for a mission. But what made Yi Qing Luo puzzled was, why was the Death God mercenary group's target the profound Phoenix Ring? Chapter 804. After thinking for a moment, Yi Qing Luo suddenly came up with a guess. Her expression suddenly became dignified and complicated. "Who is Yi Fengru to your Death God mercenary group?" This was the only conclusion Yi Qing Luo could come up with. From the beginning, she felt that this seemingly gentle second brother was not as simple as he looked. With just the power of one person, he was able to manage the entire Three Springs sect, and all the expenses were under his control. He was obviously a student of the Heavenly Academy, but he was so low-key that she didn't even know the existence of her second brother in the 2 months she was in the academy. It was enough to show his means. Last night, from the expression of Yi Tianquang, an old grandmadam, she could tell that Yi Fengru had not returned home for a long time. In other words, Yi Fengru knew that she was at home and deliberately came back. His purpose, in addition to sprinkling the soul-chasing powder on her, was also to confirm the ring on her hand. Clap, clap, clap. A crisp applause came from behind the Suicide God mercenary group. Soon after, a slender figure slowly walked out from the crowd. That handsome face that was as gentle as jade. If it wasn't Yi Fengru, who else could it be? The corner of his mouth held the usual gentle smile, constantly applauding, a pair of gentle eyes full of smiles, worthy of being my seventh sister. So quickly guess my identity. Yi Fengru's appearance confirmed that what Yi Qing Luo said was all true. Second brother? Yi Fengru looked at Yi Fengru incredulously. His eyes widened. Yi Fengru smiled. "Eighth brother, long time no see." Yi Fengru was stunned in place, unable to believe that his gentle and elegant second brother was actually a member of the Death God mercenary group, who was ranked 3rd on the honor list. And he even colluded with the Death God mercenary group to plot against Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo looked at him coldly. Her eyes were cold. Does Yi Tianquang know? It seemed that he didn't expect Yi Qing Luo to call out Yi Tianquang's name without any scruples. Yi Fengru was slightly startled and immediately laughed out loud. "So what if I know? So what if I don't know?" Father didn't know that the useless daughter he had always looked down on had quietly grown to such an extent. At this point, Yi Fengru's laughter became more and more insolent, and the gloominess in his eyes couldn't be concealed no matter how gentle he was. Holding a fickle weed in your arms like a treasure, but treating a real treasure like a weed. Ha ha ha! This is indeed Lord Father's style. Whoever Yi Tianquang likes to treat as a treasure has nothing to do with me. Yi Qing Luo snorted coldly. "I'm just curious. Why did he make a move on me? If I were to say that I'm simply interested in the ring on Seventh Sister's finger, would you believe me, Seventh Sister?" Yi Fengru smiled warmly. The expression on his face had already returned to its usual gentle and calm state. The eyes that looked at Yi Qing Luo were filled with sincerity. Yi Qing Luo sneered without hesitation. "I don't believe you." "Ha ha!" Yi Fengru laughed heartily. His chest heaved up and down as he laughed heartily. "Since that's the case, Seventh Sister, please hand over the profound Phoenix Ring." He was very direct. "Reason?" Yi Qing Luo walked slowly to the front of Yi Fengru and stood still. There was no change in the expression on her face. However, Long Yinzhan and the others were all nervous. The opponent was a gold-ranked mercenary group. Even if there were only 30 people, they had no chance of winning. What's more, there were definitely many Death God mercenary group outside the tomb. Chapter 805. Seventh sister is still young. Such a precious thing. It's better to hand it over to second brother for safekeeping. Yifeng Ru's smile was still warm. He stretched out his hand and slowly placed it on Yiqing Luo's shoulder. Like a brother, loving his sister, he patted her on the shoulder, his arm up and down. Yiqing Luo's eyes turned cold, and just as his arm was about to fall, the hand holding the feather fan flipped over and pressed against Yifeng Ru's arm. At the same time, Yifeng Ru's figure retreated a few steps. That extended arm, the powder hidden in the gaps of his nails, scattered down like smoke. You dare to poison Qing Luo? Xiao Jin's expression was extremely ugly as he clenched the gold coin darts in his hand, as though the moment the command was given, he would absolutely fight to the death with the other party. Poison. The young mercenaries' expressions changed immediately as they looked at Yifeng Ru with vigilance and disgust. Yiqing Luo squinted her eyes in interest. She should be glad that her nose was sensitive, and when she got close to Yifeng Ru, she could smell the faint herbal smell on him. This was the herbal smell that an alchemist would have on them. But the smell on Yifeng Ru was not like an ordinary alchemist's fragrance, but it was a kind of strange smell, very faint, almost undetectable. If she didn't guess wrongly, Yifeng Ru should not be an orthodox alchemist, but a dark alchemist. The so-called dark alchemist was not like ordinary alchemists who refined those kinds of stabilizing pills to raise their profound grade, heal injuries, etc. What they refined were all kinds of strange and complicated poisons, like soul-chasing powder, corpse-dissolving powder, etc., were all refined by dark alchemists. Seventh sister's reaction is really fast. No wonder eldest sister lost to you. Yifeng Ru didn't seem to be flustered from being caught red-handed poisoning. He only gave a gentle smile as he wiped off the powder hidden in his fingernails. But no matter how fast seventh sister's reaction is, no matter how powerful you are, I'm afraid you won't be able to fight against 4 people. His tone was gentle and indifferent. Those 30 over Death God mercenary groups, mercenaries, cooperated as they took a step forward. How could Xiao Jin and the rest fall behind as they also took a step forward? Yifeng Ru swept him a glance as his brows couldn't conceal the disdain in his eyes. Moreover, you still have a bunch of burdens behind you. I'm sure seventh sister won't bear for them to get into trouble. Burdens? The young mercenaries' expressions turned extremely ugly as they gritted their teeth and stared at Burdens. This seemingly cultured and refined man, why was his words so irritating? Yi, phone, yi, yi. That pair of enchanting and charming eyes, like the bright stars in the sky, flowed with charm. Under the illumination of the luminous pearl, it seemed to flow with an extremely captivating charm. Even Yifeng Ru was momentarily absent-minded. His gentle brows overflowed with gloominess as he lost his patience. Second brother is only advising seventh sister. A wise man submits to circumstances to save yourself unnecessary trouble. If we were to start a fight, were you injured, and how many of you die, seventh sister will feel heartache. Isn't that so? Yiqing Luo seemed as though she had heard a joke, as her slender fingers covered her pink lips, as her long and narrow eyes outlined a sneer of ridicule. Second brother, did you really think that only you know how to poison? She, who was under Ghost Doctor's tutelage and had the 100-pill refining ability, wasn't some orthodox alchemist. She had dabbled in stabilizing pills or poisons and the like. Chapter 806. Looking at Yiqing Luo's smiling face, Yifeng Ru's gentle pupils suddenly widened. As though he was struck by lightning, he froze on the spot. The next second, Yifeng Ru's hand covered his chest as his face turned pale, as his slender body staggered and fell backwards. Ru, Feng Ru, Brother Ru. The 3 people behind, upon sensing Yifeng Ru's abnormal state, immediately rushed up to support him. Yiqing Luo, What did you do to Brother Ru? The young lady's hands hugged Yi Feng Ru's arm tightly. Her face was filled with hatred and resentment towards Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo raised her brows. Her fingertips brushed past her chin. Her pink lips moved slightly as she said word by word, just giving her a taste of her own medicine. I believe, with second brother's ability, it should be no problem to cure this poison. Yi Feng Ru's breathing suddenly became hurried. The muscles on his face were trembling slightly. The 5 fingers which were pressed on his chest gradually tightened, clenching into a fist shape. The green veins were already bulging. Cure? If he could cure this poison, he wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Yi Feng Ru only felt a sudden, numbing feeling in his heart, followed by a sharp pain, as though it was being pierced by needles. Before he could adapt to this pain, his heart suddenly inflated, as though it was about to explode any time. Yi Feng Ru had refined poison for more than 10 years, but had never met such a strange poison. The more he thought, the more obvious the swelling feeling in his heart became. His entire face was twisted, as his hands were clenched tightly in extreme pain. The young lady's eyes were red, as big beads of tears flowed down. Brother Ru. Brother Ru. The beautiful lady's eyes were cold, as she looked at Yi Qing Luo coldly. Hand over the antidote. Since I'm going to die anyway, why don't I drag you all to accompany me in death? Yi Qing Luo smiled charmingly. You all think that you're so smart, but it's just the remaining tricks that I'm playing. What was a wise man submits to circumstances? If she really handed over the profound Phoenix Ring, would the Death God mercenary group really let them off? Yi Feng Ru knew the origin of the profound Phoenix Ring, so naturally he knew the original owner of this ring. Yi Feng Ru did not dare to offend Di Emotian. Furthermore, they had to maintain the reputation of the Death God mercenary group. Once their objective was achieved, none of the world group would be able to escape. Yi Qing Luo was tired of playing this kind of lousy tricks in her past life. Yi Feng Ru coaxed her like she was a child. You. The young lady's eyes were red as she clenched her fists tightly. She was so angry that her whole body was trembling, but she couldn't do anything to Yi Qing Luo. These 2 men and 1 woman were obviously the core members of the Death God mercenary group. They were extremely concerned about Yi Feng Ru. This also meant that Yi Feng Ru's position in the Death God mercenary group was not low, and he was brothers who had gone through fire and water with these core members. This knowledge made Yi Qing Luo heave a sigh of relief. Yi Feng Ru's life was in her hands. The Death God mercenary group would temporarily not make a move on them. The 2 groups of people faced each other, and no one moved. Only Yi Feng Ru's increasingly ragged breathing and his pained voice resounded in the spacious tomb. The more she listened, the sadder she cried. The 2 men and 1 woman's expressions turned uglier by the minute. As though there was no other way, one of the delicate-looking men opened his mouth with a steely green face. The world group will let you leave. Hand over the antidote. Did I say that I'm leaving? Yi Qing Luo's eyes curved as she smiled in an extremely casual manner. The beautiful lady's willowy brows creased into a bundle. Don't push your luck. Chapter 807. His words caused those people to choke, their expressions unsightly, but they had no way to retort. Yi Qing Luo's gaze lightly swept past Yi Feng Ru, whose face was filled with pain. Her gaze was indifferent, totally not like she was looking at her second brother, but an insignificant stranger. She didn't care whether he lived or died. The few people in the Death God mercenary group didn't dare to use Yi Feng Ru's life to bet if Yi Qing Luo really didn't care about him, this second brother. Recalling the time when he was in the dark, he saw Yi Qing Luo expressionlessly slit the neck of the stone wall man. His technique was skillful and his expression was cold. It was completely unlike the emotions a 15-year-old girl should have. At this moment, the god-slaying mercenary group only felt that this lady was too cold-blooded. He was so cold-blooded that he couldn't feel any emotion from her. After a long time, the beautiful woman lowered her eyes and looked at Yi Feng Ru, who was leaning against her arm. She opened her mouth and said, "What do you want?" "Mission." Yi Qing Luo replied simply, I need the Death God Mercenary Group to help us complete the mission. The Death God Mercenary Group did not participate in the random missions, but they were aware of the situation of this event. The Matter of the World group, drawing a random scroll, which had never appeared in all these years, had already spread throughout the entire mercenary world. What kind of mission did you draw for the tomb of the Ling King? Guard the Zombie King. Yiqing Luo didn't hide anything. She had originally planned to borrow the strength of the Death God Mercenary Group to see if they could complete the mission. Now that such a good opportunity had been presented to her, how could she reject it? Guardian Zombie King? The expressions of the two men and one woman instantly turned ashen. They looked at each other and frowned. Up until now, no one has been able to enter the deeper layers of the tomb. The place guarding the Corpse Kings is in front of the tomb's main tomb. Even we can't reach that place. You don't need to tell me whether or not you can do it. Yiqing Luo replied coldly. My motive is to guard the Corpse King. You only need to tell me to go or not. The beautiful woman's exquisite and beautiful face was slightly twisted. The three of them looked at each other for a long time without saying anything. They were probably using the mercenary group's emblem to communicate with each other internally. Yiqing Luo didn't rush them as she quietly waited for their decision. Not long later, the beautiful lady's face sunk as she looked at Yiqing Luo. All right, I represent the Death God Mercenary Group to agree to your request. Now can you help Ru to detoxify the poison? Yi Fengru, who was leaning on the woman's arm, couldn't help but tremble. It was clear that he couldn't find anything strange in Yi Fengru's body, even with his profound qi. However, Yi Fengru was in so much pain that he had already lost consciousness. Looking at Yiqing Luo's confident look, it was obvious that only Yiqing Luo could cure this poison. The more the young girl thought about it, the angrier she became. Her eyes were filled with disgust and mockery. I really don't know what your heart is made of. You can even kill your second brother and use him to threaten us. Yiqing Luo's eyes narrowed as her lips twitched coldly as she sneered in disdain. Kitty Lee was leaning on Yiqing Luo's side, and when she heard the young lady's words, she was instantly infuriated as her quick-witted eyes stared fiercely at the person opposite. He was obviously the one who struck first. He's allowed to lay a vicious hand on his own sister, but elder sister isn't allowed to retaliate? Saying that, she took a step forward and raised her hand fiercely. I'll give you a slap and you're not allowed to retaliate. Chapter 808. Kitty. Yiqing Luo calmly called out to Kitty Lee. Kitty Lee winked at that young lady and gave a heavy harumph. When she turned back to look at Yiqing Luo, her face was already smiling sweetly like a child. Yiqing Luo pulled Kitty Lee behind her and shot a glance at the solemn-looking man's hand as she smiled calmly. Azura Group leader must be careful. If you hurt any part of my brother, I will leave it untouched and let my dear brother suffer the same injury. The man's tightly clenched hand suddenly loosened. A pair of sharp eyes stared coldly at Yiqing Luo, as though he wanted to see through her eyes, to see through her soul. However, the man only saw an endless whirlpool in that pair of deep pupils. Just a little more, and he would have fallen into that whirlpool, unable to climb out. Both parties reached an agreement. Yiqing Luo wasn't that silly to help Yi Fengru detoxify the poison. She only helped Yi Fengru to alleviate the pain in his heart. Every 2 hours, Yi Fengru would once again experience the excruciating pain that pierced his heart and bones. Azura Mercenary Group was naturally infuriated, but there was nothing they could do. After Yi Fengru regained consciousness, he found out that Azura Mercenary Group had signed an agreement with Yiqing Luo because of him. He clutched his heart, and the moment he thought of that swelling pain earlier, his body couldn't help but tremble slightly, which had already formed an instinctive fear. Yi Fengru had just stood up with the help of 2 men. When he raised his eyes, he met with a pair of beautiful, smiling faces. The young lady's smile was enchanting. Her long and narrow eyes were extremely charming. Her pink lips opened and closed. Her sweet voice, word by word, was clearly transmitted into his ears. Thank you, second brother, for your advice. If it wasn't for Yi Fengru, Yiqing Luo would definitely not use such means to threaten the Azura Mercenary Group to cooperate. Yifeng Ru heard the sarcasm in Yi Qing Luo's words, and his body trembled, almost falling onto the ground. This completely explained what was called moving a rock to smash one's own feet. After signing the agreement, Yi Qing Luo also found out that the solemn Azura mercenary group leader was called Nangong Firen. That delicate-looking man was called Wei Beilai, the Azura mercenary group's executive group leader. The beautiful woman was called Zi Qianqian, and she was the vice captain of the Azura group. The 14-year-old girl was Nangong Firen's twin sister, Nangong Lin. She wasn't a mercenary of the god-slaying mercenary group. She just followed them to gain some experience. After understanding everything, Yifeng Ru was well rested and could move on his own. The two groups of people headed into the depths of the tomb one after the other. Yi Qing Luo made the Azura group walk in front to open up the path, while they followed closely behind about 20 steps to the left. Qing Luo, Kine, be trusted? Xiao Jin's brows creased as he used the mercenary group badge to transmit his voice. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into a cold arc. Untrustworthy, but there is still value in using him. With just their strength, it was likely that they would not be able to pass through the layers of traps and formations in the tomb and reach the main tomb. Before Yifeng Ru could find a way to save himself, the god-slaying mercenary group could only fulfill their deal. Everyone be careful, in case these hypocrites do something secretly, Yi Qing Luo reminded them. The god-slaying mercenary group had always been ranked third on the honor board, so naturally they were arrogant and proud. So how would they be willing to lower their status to deal with these youngsters? Especially when they were threatened by a bunch of youngsters who totally didn't put them in their eyes. It was inevitable that they would use the same method to threaten them. If Yifeng Ru had poisoned her brother, Yi Qing Luo couldn't guarantee that she had all the antidotes on her. Just as she was saying that, the god-slaying mercenary group, who were 20 steps away, suddenly shouted angrily, "Not good. There's a riot in the tomb." Immediately following that, the 30 over god-slaying mercenary group's mercenaries turned around and swarmed towards them. The World Group's youngsters were immediately on high alert as they displayed a defensive formation. Suddenly, a deafening sound rang out beside his ear. Chapter 809. The entire tomb started to shake violently. Pieces of gravel started to fall from the surrounding steep rock walls. Nangong Firen was running at the forefront, and on seeing this bunch of young mercenaries still standing there foolishly blocking the way, she angrily shouted, "Get lost! Do you want to die here?" As the ground shook, cracks began to appear on it. The young mercenaries still didn't move as they supported each other and stood on the same spot, waiting for Yi Qing Luo's instructions. Towards danger, Yi Qing Luo had an instinctive sense. When the tomb started to shake violently, Yi Qing Luo felt an unprecedented sense of panic. Faintly, there was an intense, scorching feeling surging from her profound jade heart. This scorching feeling wasn't the same as when she was probing other people's profound jade heart grade or profound grade, but it was a kind of like a raging fire was lingering around her profound jade heart, as though there was an intense reaction. Yi Qing Luo suppressed this discomfort as her gaze swept across the Azura god group who had already flocked over. Her face turned slightly pale as she berated sternly, "Idiots! If you don't want to die, don't run over here." The tomb's ground had already cracked and the surrounding rock walls had fallen into gravel. If they were to move swiftly now, it would only cause the tomb to collapse. Now they were only at the periphery of King Ling's tomb, and this place was the easiest to collapse. If it was as expected, the entrance of the tomb had already been blocked by the collapsed boulders. The Azura god group's people actually made such a huge commotion as they tried to run back. Wouldn't it accelerate the shaking of the tomb's periphery, which was originally on the verge of collapse? When had the Azura god group ever been scolded as idiots? And it was even scolded by a young lass, so how could they feel at ease? Get lost! The Azura god group had already rushed over to their side, as Nangong Firen bellowed with a steely green face. "You're hopelessly stupid." Yi Qing Luo took a step back as she avoided Nangong Firen's outstretched hand. This action made the scorching feeling in her chest become even more intense. She could even feel that there was a ball of extremely vigorous flame burning in her heart. Rumble, just at this moment, the place where they were standing shook violently as the ground collapsed. Everyone's feet were on empty ground as their bodies rapidly fell downwards. Everyone's faces were filled with shock and fear. Only Yiqing Luo shut her eyes tightly as her face overflowed with pain. Her slender, white little hand firmly pressed down on her profound heart jade. For some reason, she felt as if there was a voice by her ear, constantly calling out to her. However, she could not hear the summoning words clearly. Yiqing Luo and the others were in the tomb and didn't know that the entire outside the tomb was filled with dark clouds, gloomy and gloomy. In the air, there was a suffocating chill. From time to time, lightning flashed, thunder roared, and wind and clouds rose. A powerful storm current rushed into the sky from the center of the tomb. However, in an instant, the storm dissipated into thin air and disappeared. The Imperial Palace. This strong movement made Diemo Xian, who was bending over the table and handling some matters, frowned. As he stood up, his gorgeous purple robe fluttered in the wind. His black hair cascaded over his shoulders like clouds and smoke. His slender figure was smooth and incomparably breathtaking. However, the man's peerlessly handsome face and his long and narrow obsidian-like black eyes clearly had a faint demonic charm. But at this moment, there was a thick and cold glint. Chapter 8:10. The moment the World Group's mercenaries fell, under Yiqing Luo's instructions, they used their profound qi to lighten their bodies and finally landed stably on the ground. As for the Azure Group, they were not so lucky. The sudden collapse made them unable to react for a moment. When Nangong Firen and the others saw Yiqing Luo and the others' actions, they immediately released their profound qi, totally disregarding their own group members. When the group of people stood firmly on the ground, there were no casualties on the World Group side. As for the God Killer Group, 2 members had fallen to their deaths, and there were more than 10 who had hurriedly released their qi when they landed, but in the situation of being too flustered, they had injured their legs. Where are we? Nangong Lin, who was hiding behind Nangong Firen, asked in a trembling voice. Nangong Firen's face was ashen, and she did not reply. The 2 mercenary groups had met with an accident at the same time, but on their side, there were casualties and injuries. On the contrary, the brat mercenary group that they looked down upon was unscathed, and they began to adapt to the current situation in an orderly manner. How could he, the leader of the gold mercenary group, endure this? Captain, Yi Fengru's expression didn't look any better. The night-luminescent pearls in their hands had fallen somewhere, and the surroundings were dark. Don't speak. Yiqing Luo suppressed her voice as she spoke in a deep and cold voice. Xiao Yi, where's the luminous pearl? As Yin, Xiao Yi, and Xiao Jin were falling, they quickly kept the luminous pearl into their space pockets. In a place like the tomb, the luminous pearl was their only source of light. Hearing Yiqing Luo's question, Yin Xiao Yi immediately took out the luminous pearl. The surroundings were faintly discernible under the illumination of the luminous pearls. Then, Xiao Jin also took out his night-luminescent pearl. The surrounding environment was gradually reflected in everyone's eyes. This was a bottomless tunnel. It was extremely spacious, about the width of 10 adults walking side by side. The air was cold and damp, and there were even green vines growing on the walls. Touching it with his hand, it felt sticky and disgusting. This should be the middle layer of the Ling King's tomb. Yiqing Luo carefully sized up the surroundings. From the emptiness of the voice and the circulation of the air, he could roughly tell. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased tightly. The Ling King's tomb had always been the most secure place, and most people would not enter it. How could the periphery of the tomb collapse? That kind of collapse was like a sudden earthquake. Then the entire tomb began to crack and finally collapsed. Completely, it did not seem like a natural collapse. Instead, it was a collapse caused by the depths of the tomb. Could it be that someone had entered the tomb before them, or even reached the lowest level of the tomb, and then triggered some sort of mechanism that caused the tomb to collapse? How do you know that this is the middle level of the Ling King's tomb? Zi Qianqian's beautiful eyes stared coldly at Yi Qing Luo as a glint of jealousy flashed past her eyes. Ever since Yi Qing Luo appeared, her beauty and her ability seemed to have been crushed by Yi Qing Luo till she had no way to retaliate. Zi Qianqian, who had always been the center of attention, could not tolerate another existence that was even more dazzling than her. Yi Qing Luo totally didn't bother about Zi Qianqian's question, as she concentrated all her attention on the surrounding environment. Zi Qianqian's face darkened, and an embarrassed look appeared on his face. He arrogantly raised his head and lightly snorted. "You really think that you are the backbone of the group? You casually order others around and spout nonsense. Do you take us for fools?" Chapter 8:11. You don't be in a hurry to deny it. Yi Qing Luo glanced at her coldly, and in the tranquil and strange tomb, that gaze seemed especially eerie. Immediately after that, Yi Qing Luo turned her head around and continued looking at the direction where the green vines were growing as she said, "Now, the one who is at a disadvantage is not us, the world group." This sentence successfully made Zi Qianqian shut his mouth unwillingly. Indeed, no matter if it was facing a sudden danger situation, they weren't able to be as calm and composed as Yi Qing Luo, accurately giving out instructions. It was their own group members who were able to make the most correct decision under the circumstances where they didn't have any instructions. They couldn't even match up to the world group. They suddenly understood why the world group was able to advance to a bronze plate mercenary group within a day, if they were allowed to develop. In future, there would definitely be a spot for them on the Mercenary Association's honor board. Nangong Firen's expression instantly congealed as she glanced sideways at Yi Fengru. Yi Fengru's face was pale as he shook his head. He didn't know when his cowardly and incompetent seventh sister had become so bold and courageous. Bones! Bones! Human bones! Suddenly a sharp shriek exploded from the crowd. Nangong Lin was hysterically hugging her head as she recklessly charged over. Her petite body crashed into Yi Fengru's arms as her arms wrapped tightly around Yi Fengru's waist. "Brother Ru, these are all dead people's bones." Boo-hoo, boo-hoo. Although Yi Fengru had slowed down the poison in his body, but Yi Qing Luo hadn't cleared it for him. Now that he was knocked into by Nangong Lin, Yi Fengru felt a piercing pain in his heart. Although it was short, but that piercing pain made Yi Fengru feel a chill down his spine. Without thinking, he directly pushed Nangong Lin away. Nangong Lin was unsteady as she was pushed onto the ground as both her hands stabbed into the sharp rocks on the ground. Missy's delicate skin was instantly melted by the rocks as red blood seeped out. Blood! Yi Qing Luo's expression instantly turned gloomy as she berated sternly, "Block up the blood. This is a tomb, and human blood is the easiest to attract, ain't she?" The young lady was in so much pain that her tears kept flowing, but she didn't forget to raise her head, wanting to argue with Yi Qing Luo. But the minute she met Yi Qing Luo's pair of chilly, charming eyes, she was frightened by her imposing manner and didn't dare to say a single word as she directly pounced into Nangong Firen's arms, crying out in a low voice. Nangong Firen frowned and glanced at Yi Fengru coldly. He saw Yi Fengru clutching his heart with a pained expression on his face, as if he hadn't noticed his gaze at all. Nangong Firen frowned and looked away. He quickly took out a handkerchief and stopped the bleeding on Nangong Lin's palm. Nangong Lin was still trembling, and tears streamed down her face. It was hard to tell if it was because of the pain, or because she was sad that Yi Fengru had pushed her away. Over the years, thousands of grave robbers and mercenaries have come, but the furthest mercenary group has only reached the middle layer of the tomb. This is enough to show how dangerous the tomb is. Yi Qing Luo's voice was extremely cold and calm as she walked slowly to the corpse's bones, which had caused Nangong Lin to scream earlier. Under the illumination of the luminous pearl, there were about 100 sets of human bones. Perhaps it was because of the passage of time, Many of the white bones had already shattered, and the layers of white bones looked extremely eerie and terrifying. Yiqing Luo squatted down expressionlessly as she scrutinized those human bones and continued. The number of tomb robbers or mercenaries who died in Ling Ling King's tomb is uncountable, so it's not strange to see human bones. Chapter 8:12. Even for these mercenaries who had been through hundreds of battles and were used to seeing blood and killing, when they saw the hundreds of broken bones piled up, they were somewhat horrified. Even if they weren't horrified, they weren't able to be like Yiqing Luo, looking at those bones expressionlessly or even using her feet to lift the bones. The bones shattered upon contact. The shattering sound was extremely ear-piercing in the quiet tomb, making one's heart palpitate. Yiqing Luo was only a 15-year-old young lady. How could she be fearless when facing these eerie white bones? A real 15-year-old girl's way of opening up the eerie white bones should be like Nangong Lin's. This should be a mercenary group who came to the Ling King's tomb to complete a mission. They must have touched some array in the tomb or attracted the corpse chi, causing all of them to lose their lives here. Yiqing Luo played it down as she stood up and gazed ahead. Since we've reached the middle layer, then let's head straight to the main tomb. Nangong Lin buried her head in Nangong Firen's arms as she raised her head and cried, "I'm not going. I don't want to go." After seeing so many white bones, Nangong Lin, who had never met with any danger, was so terrified that her limbs had turned stiff. Yiqing Luo merely swept a glance at them as her lips curled into a chilly smile. "Of course, you can choose not to follow us. If my second brother's poison acts up, then don't blame me for not abiding by our deal." Nangong Firen and Zi Qianqian instantly stared at Yiqing Luo angrily. "I don't have the time to waste with you guys here." Yiqing Luo called out to her brothers as she walked straight ahead. It was silent in front of them. The long and deep tunnel was pitch black, with no end in sight. Nangong Firen and the others were still standing at the same spot. He glanced sideways at Yifeng Ru as he frowned and asked in a deep voice, "Can you cure this poison?" Yifeng Ru didn't reply, but the sound of his teeth clenching and his pale face had already replaced all the answers. Nangong Firen's brows creased even tighter as a cold glint shot out from his eyes. "Then we must follow you to the main tomb." The coldness in his words made Yifeng Ru's face turn paler. Nangong Firen was blaming him. In other words, Nangong Firen was displeased when he pushed Nangong Lin's lower body. Yifeng Ru wanted to explain, but he didn't know how to start. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't have enough ability, if it wasn't for the fact that he had underestimated Yiqing Luo's ability and heartlessness, then he wouldn't have shot himself in the foot and wouldn't have ended up being used as a tool by Yiqing Luo to threaten him. Just then, a gust of chilly wind blew over. Nangong Lin's entire body was trembling, and tears were already flowing out of her eyes. "I don't dare. Brother, let's leave the tomb. Let's go home." Nangong Firen gently patted the woman in her arms and sighed helplessly. "Linner, I'm here. If we leave and your brother Ru is poisoned, you'll cry again." Nangong Lin recalled Yifeng Ru's pained expression, and her whimpering stopped. He couldn't bear to see Yifeng Ru suffer, but if they followed that arrogant woman, it was very likely that they would also become one of the millions of bones. While they were discussing, Yiqing Luo and the rest had already walked far away. The luminous pearl's light gradually went further away, and the tunnel which they were in became pitch black and dim. Not long later, they couldn't even see the expressions of the people around them clearly. Chapter 8:13. Looking at the pitch-black surroundings, Nangong Firen clenched his fists tightly as he hugged Nangong Lin tightly and gave an order, "Follow up!" Now, they could only follow the world group. In this pitch-black abyss, they who didn't know where they were in the King Ling's tomb could only follow the world group to find a chance to exit. Moreover, their mission target was in the middle layer of the King Ling's tomb. The world group wanted to make use of them, so why didn't they make use of them instead? The world group's youngsters followed behind Yiqing Luo in an orderly manner. Zhao Bo turned back from time to time to take a look at the Death God mercenary group, who were still at the original spot with a puzzled expression. "Vice group leader, are we really going to leave them here?" If they had the Death God mercenary group's help, it should be much safer for them to walk around the Kingling's tomb. Vice Group leader had signed a deal with the Death God mercenary group. Wasn't to make use of them? Yiqing Luo shot a glance at him with a smile, which didn't look like a smile. They will follow up. Xiaobo didn't believe it. A gold-ranked mercenary group on the honor board had been humiliated to such a state by a mere bronze-ranked mercenary group. As long as the Death God mercenary group had some backbone, they wouldn't possibly continue to trade with them. However, this thought had just flashed past Xiaobo's mind when he heard a series of orderly footsteps. Turning back, he indeed saw Nangong Firen leading 30 over mercenaries, following them in quick steps. Xiaobo was stunned as he looked at Nangong Firen in puzzlement. He has no other choice but to choose us. After a few words of interaction, Yiqing Luo could roughly understand Nangong Firen and the other's character. Nangong Firen was someone who cared about the big picture and wouldn't be tied down just because of a small matter. Moreover, the poison in Yi Fengru's body was something that only she could cure. Towards the Death God mercenary group following them, the World Group's mercenaries didn't open their mouths to tease or ridicule them. They only followed Yiqing Luo solemnly. The group of them remained silent as they followed closely behind. The deeper they went, the colder they felt. Under the luminous pearl's glow, the air seemed to be lingering with a thin layer of fog. It was the kind of gloomy fog. It was grayish and extremely terrifying. Everyone stepped on the gravel, and the sound was especially ear-piercing under the silent and strange atmosphere. Every sound was like something was ruthlessly pounding on their hearts. He felt an inexplicable palpitation and nervousness. The expressions of the mercenaries of the Azura team became more and more solemn. Their footsteps also gradually became extremely heavy. Nangong Firen also felt the atmosphere as she looked at the expressionless and silent youths of the World Group. She clenched her teeth and berated them from the Mercenary Guild badge. Keep your spirits up. You are the elite mercenaries of the Gold Mercenary Group. Don't tell me they can't compare to those bronze plate mercenaries who haven't even grown their hair yet. The mercenaries of the Killing God Guild were scolded badly. Under the glory of the Gold Mercenary Group, they were used to being arrogant and competitive. Naturally, they were not willing to admit that they were inferior to these bronze plate brats. However, in the strange and dangerous tomb of the Ling King, there was an unknown danger ahead. They had no idea what would happen in the next second. How could he not be afraid? Looking at the fearless young faces of the world mercenaries, he could only attribute their fearlessness to the fact that they didn't know what kind of dangerous place the Ling King's tomb was. Chapter 814. The group of them had walked for an unknown period of time, and even for these cultivators who had been practicing martial arts for many years, they could feel the fatigue in their legs. The seemingly bottomless tunnel finally showed some changes. The further they walked, the narrower the tunnel became. From the original 6 to 7 people walking side by side, they gradually shifted backwards, and finally it became Yiqing Luo who was walking at the front, forming a straight line. Yiqing Luo's heart, which was hanging in the air, also sunk slightly. Earlier, based on the direction of the green vine's growth, Yiqing Luo had determined the direction which led to the bottom of King Ling's tomb. After walking for such a long time, she started to doubt her own judgment. Finally, she saw the change in the shape of the road, which proved that her determination of the direction was not wrong. This kind of narrow road, after walking for about an instant's time, there was a stone wall in front, and there was no other path. Yiqing Luo stood in front of the stone wall and was sizing it up when a young lady's barbaric voice was heard from afar. Hey, do you know how to lead the way or not? This is basically a dead end. Along the way, Nangong Lin could no longer hold back the anger which had accumulated in her heart. Now on seeing Yiqing Luo leading a dead end, the disgust in her heart gushed out. A small mercenary group is just a small mercenary group, totally ignorant. You chose this path so casually that I really thought you were sure that this was the exit. You dare to randomly choose a path in the tomb. It's still alright if you meet a dead end, but if you meet with other mechanisms or arrays and cause us to get injured, you will be a sinner. All these knowledge were what Nangong Firen was worried that Nangong Lin would be afraid along the way. So as they walked, she softly taught her some common knowledge on going out for experience learning. Nangong Lin was rather smart, and after she memorized all these, it was just the right time to give Yiqing Luo a tight slap on her face. Yiqing Luo totally ignored Nangong Lin's hooting as her gaze was still on the stone wall, as her half-squinted eyes revealed some seriousness. Seeing Yiqing Luo keeping silent, Nangong Lin became even more complacent as her voice rose by a few notches. The world group's trash. If you want to leave the tomb alive, you'd better follow my brother obediently. Just based on a few of you empty shells, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave even after another 500 years. Lin, Nangong Firen frowned and pulled her sister into her arms. Although she sounded like she was blaming Nangong Lin, she didn't explain what Nangong Lin had just said. In other words, Nangong Firen agreed with Nangong Lin. Yiqing Luo originally didn't want to bother about Nangong Lin. However, the words that Nangong Lin said had angered her. His protective heart was immediately filled with anger. She slowly turned around, her gaze as cold as a torch. There were dozens of people between the two of them, but unfortunately, when Yiqing Luo's gaze fell onto Nangong Lin felt a chill running down her spine as her entire body started to tremble. Following that, they heard Yiqing Luo's cold and indifferent voice rang in the spacious tomb. If you're really that powerful, just leave. There's no need to follow us. You. Nangong Lin flew into a rage out of humiliation as she struggled free from Nangong Firen's arm and pointed at Yiqing Luo as she berated. If it wasn't for the fact that you, this vicious and evil woman, had poisoned Brother Ru, would we even care about following you? Oh. Yiqing Luo's brows rose as the smile in her eyes turned colder. Then ask your brother, if my second brother wasn't poisoned, would he choose to form an alliance? Yiqing Luo intentionally used the word form an alliance. She was giving Nangong Firen a way out. Liner, enough. Nangong Firen naturally wouldn't answer this question as he directly grabbed Nangong Lin's arm and stared at her, indicating for her to shut up. Chapter 8:15. Yiqing Luo retracted her vision as her gaze fell onto the stone wall. This tunnel, there are only two ways to choose. Even if this side is unable to lead to the bottom of the tomb, at most we could just turn back and choose the other side to continue walking. Her tone was light and casual. The Azura group's mercenaries felt that it was especially piercing to their ears. What was called at most we could just turn back. This kind of gloomy place to walk all the way here was already an extremely strong test to their souls. Going back and forth was simply a waste of time. Towards the Azura group's dissatisfaction, Yiqing Luo turned a deaf ear to it. Her attention was completely placed on this stone wall. The top of the surrounding stone walls were covered with green vines and moss. Only the stone wall. Although it looked gray and unremarkable, but there wasn't any vines or moss on the stone wall. After gazing for a long time, Yiqing Luo raised her hand and the red feather fan in her fingertips gently touched the stone wall. With just a slight touch, perhaps it was because there wasn't anyone around for a long time and it was corroded by the corpse chi, the broken stones which were attached to the stone wall started to roll down. Yiqing Luo retreated a few steps, and when those broken stones were about to fall, she then congealed her profound chi and swept up a whirlwind, sweeping all the broken stones above the stone wall. After the broken stones had fallen, the gray stone wall was clearly reflected in everyone's eyes. That stone wall was suffused with a lifeless black-red color, which was extremely strange. What made one's heart tremble was the totem drawn on the stone wall. That was a man holding a long spear, dressed in battle armor. He should be a peerless hero, with a valiant and imposing manner. However, that totem seemed to be covered with fresh blood, looking extremely sinister and terrifying. This is War God, Ling Wang. Yiqing Luo narrowed her eyes as she sized up the totem in detail. To be able to carve a human-shaped totem on the stone wall of Ling Wang's tomb. Other than Ling Wang, there shouldn't be anyone else. Nangong Firen had already led Zi Qianqian and the others past the world group and walked next to Yiqing Luo. After seeing the totem on the stone wall, Nangong Lin gave a shrill cry as she pounced into Nangong Firen's arms. Zi Qianqian and Yi Fengru's expressions were slightly grave as they exchanged glances. Could it be? Ling Wang's main tomb is behind the stone wall? Impossible. Yiqing Luo interrupted their guesses without any hesitation. Zi Qianqian's brows instantly knitted together as her beautiful face was filled with displeasure. Vice Group Leader of the World Group, aren't you a little too conceited? They were a dignified gold medal mercenary group, yet they were repeatedly led by a bronze medal mercenary group. Right from the start, it was Yiqing Luo who was in charge of everything. This kind of feeling made them feel very uncomfortable. According to the information on the tomb of the Lai Ling King, the tomb of the Lai Ling King is guarded by a formation. Yiqing Luo lightly lifted her eyelids. If Azura God Group's vice group leader hadn't investigated the mission's information clearly before setting off for the mission, why not take this opportunity to read through the information on Ling Ling King's tomb, in case you make a fool out of yourself? Zi Qianqian's face immediately turned red, and Yiqing Luo's words made the hearts of the other mercenaries jump abruptly. These youths had investigated the tomb of the Ling King beforehand. In other words, they knew exactly how dangerous the tomb was. They didn't even have the courage of a few young mercenaries. These gold medal mercenaries' pride had suffered a huge blow. Unknowingly, they all puffed out their chests, as no one was willing to admit that they couldn't be compared to a bronze medal mercenary. Yiqing Luo's eyes suddenly flashed as she raised her hand and touched the totem on the stone wall. Chapter 816. She had finally snatched back the leading rights. Nangong Firen's eyes were masked with disdain. Bronze plates were bronze plates. No matter how shocking their performance was, it couldn't change the fact that they lacked experience. So what if they had checked the information of King Ling's tomb? Wouldn't they still commit the lowest level mistake? Nangong Firen gave a light harumph as he took a big stride forward and raised his hand to stop her. But before Nangong Firen's hand stretched out, Yiqing Luo's finger had already pressed onto the head of King Ling's totem. Her slender, jade-like fingers, under the contrast of blood, looked extremely fair. A loud boom, boom, boom was heard as that stone wall shook slightly. Everyone felt that the entire tunnel was shaking. Nangong Firen's hand also retracted back because of the shaking as he hugged Nangong Lin tightly. Nangong Lin had taken a trip to the gates of hell because of the earthquake outside the tomb. Now that she felt the ground beneath her feet shaking, she couldn't help but let out a wah-wah scream. The entire tunnel was long and serene. Nangong Lin's screams reverberated. While everyone was in a fluster, their heads were in extreme pain from the shaking. "Shut up." Yiqing Luo's voice was cold and dignified. Two casual words caused Nangong Lin's voice to stop abruptly. By the time Nangong Lin realized that she was so obedient, her face flushed red as she gritted her teeth and was about to scold Yiqing Luo. But all the words were stuck at the side of her mouth. That stone wall in front of them started to move towards the right at an extremely slow speed. Like an old machine which hadn't been moved for a long time, it gave off an ear-piercing friction sound. That swaying feeling earlier was caused by the stone wall's movement. Realizing this, everyone's uneasy hearts finally calmed down. After the stone wall opened up, an extremely smelly, moldy smell came gushing out, together with a thick stench. The two smells blended together in an extremely strange manner. This smell, as compared to the World Group's mercenaries when they first entered the tomb, was much thicker by 1,000 times. Azura Group's mercenaries immediately held onto the stone wall, which was filled with vines as they bent down and vomited. On the contrary, the World Group's mercenaries followed behind Yiqing Luo without a change in expression, as one after another, they walked into the stone wall which was opened up. It was as if he could not smell the disgusting and unbearable stench at all. Nangong Firen's face was ashen, and he looked as though he was about to vomit. He glared at the young mercenaries with his cold and sinister eyes. Swish! A shiny object was thrown in a beautiful arc in the air toward Nangong Firen. Nangong Firen stretched out his arm and caught the item. Opening his palm, he saw a palm-sized white jade bottle lying on his palm. It was still emitting a refreshing medicinal fragrance, which diluted the unpleasant fishy smell in his nose. Is this the quality of a gold-ranked mercenary group? Before doing the mission, you don't know how to investigate the specific background and information of the mission. You also don't know how to prepare the things you need to prepare according to the mission location. Yiqing Luo's lips twitched in ridicule as her eyes couldn't conceal the contempt. Gold-ranked mercenary group. Ranked 3rd on the honor list. It's really hard for me not to doubt the authenticity of your mercenary group. What do you know? Nangong Lin's face flushed red as she roared furiously. On what basis do you doubt the Azura group? If you have the ability, then compete with my brother. Use your ability to speak. Nangong Lin's words had just finished roaring when Nangong Firen tugged her arm, shaking her head at her. Chapter 817. Facing Yiqing Luo's disdain and ridicule, Nangong Firen was filled with rage. But he couldn't utter a single word of rebuttal, because every single word that Yiqing Luo said was the truth. The bottle was filled with air-freshening pills. There were more than 50 refreshing pills. No wonder. After they found out that the World Group had drawn a random mission, which was the Ling King's tomb mission, they waited in the tomb for a few hours, but the World Group didn't appear. The mercenaries of the World Group weren't like other mercenary groups. In order to complete the mission as soon as possible, after learning the location of the mission, he madly rushed to the destination. The World Group used an afternoon and a night's time to make sufficient preparations for the Ling King's tomb mission. Nangong Firen had to admit that the Death God mercenary group was indeed inferior to the World Mercenary Group in this aspect. Even if their Azura group's motive for coming to the Ling King's tomb was to surround the World Group, hence they had purposely accepted a mission regarding the tomb. However, no matter what the purpose was, they should also make sufficient preparations before leaving. If it wasn't for them underestimating the World Group and overestimating their own abilities, they wouldn't have been humiliated to such an extent by the World Group and wouldn't have been left speechless by the World Group. It wasn't that their Death God mercenary group had lost their past glory and lost the ability to be a gold medal mercenary. It was just that the opponents they encountered were even more powerful. Of course, Nangong Firen did not admit that he was powerful in terms of martial strength. Instead, as a mercenary group, the World Mercenary Group was superior no matter if it was the way of doing things or handling matters. In the future, the World Mercenary Group would definitely be an extremely strong opponent. Nangong Firen passed the jade bottles one by one in silence. When Yi Fengru received the air-freshening pill, his expression was somewhat unsightly. He gripped the jade bottle tightly for a moment before pouring out a pill and throwing it into his mouth. After swallowing the air-freshening pill, everyone finally felt the feeling of being reborn. Nangong Firen looked at the World Group, which was already a distance away, before looking at the opening stone wall. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Xian waved his arm and gritted his teeth. After entering the stone wall, there was another long, quiet, and deep tunnel. The only difference was that the air here was much colder than outside the stone wall. This kind of coldness was the kind that emanated from the bones. The thin mist floating in the air was faintly suffused with a green color. The yin qi was heavy and horrifying. The elite members of the Killing God group furrowed their brows. Withstanding the huge psychological pressure, they braced themselves and followed the leader's footsteps forward. These mercenaries had never imagined that they would be at the bottom of the Qianling King's tomb. They all thought that at most they would be able to complete the outer perimeter quests of the Tomb King's tomb, and then complete the quests Yi Fengru gave them. It wasn't a simple mission, but if they could complete an ordinary mission from the tomb, it would be enough for them to show off in the mercenary world. They could also ride on the wave of popularity. But now, all the plans had deviated from the original design. The deeper they went into the tomb, the more dangerous it was for them, who was not afraid of death, especially for elite gold medal mercenaries like them. They hadn't enjoyed enough glory, so how could they be willing to die? With apprehensions and unwillingness in their hearts, the more they walked, the more fearful they became, unlike the world group's young mercenaries who had no distracting thoughts in their hearts. With such a comparison, it was no wonder that Yi Qing Luo would question the authenticity of their gold-ranked mercenary group. Chapter 8:18. Ordinary corpses would definitely not be able to nurture such a huge number of corpse worms. With so many corpse worms appearing, it indicates that we are not far from the Guardian Corpse King. The World Group's mission was to bring the Guardian Corpse King back. To the World Group, to be able to reach the Guardian Corpse King's array, it should be a joyous matter. But Yi Qing Luo only felt strange. According to the 3000 Peach Blossom Group's information on Ling King's tomb, the tomb is set up with arrays and mechanisms, and if one is slightly careless, one's head would be separated from his body. But we're about to reach the Guardian Corpse King's array, but we haven't met with any danger along the way. Not to mention mechanisms, there wasn't even a single bit of array at all. The only danger was this wave of corpse worms. How could it be so smooth? Thinking back to when they were at the outer boundary, the sudden collapse of the tomb, Yi Qing Luo was even more certain that her earlier guess was probably true. There was another group of people at the bottom of the tomb. These arrays and mechanisms were settled by that group of people to be able to reach the bottom of the tomb without any casualties. The other party, who on earth were they? They actually had such ability? Yi Qing Luo's expression turned increasingly grave. Yi Qing Luo's words were clearly heard by every single mercenary in the world group. They also realized that there wasn't any danger along the way, and it was merely the tranquility before the storm. This mission in Ling King's tomb was much more dangerous than what they had imagined. The world group's emotions had also affected the Azure group's side. Nan Gongfiren's attention was totally placed on Yi Qing Luo as his eyes didn't conceal his interest toward her at all. Seeing Yi Qing Luo's expression gradually turning grave and finally becoming more and more solemn, his heart also started to tremble fiercely. He knew in his heart that the journey ahead would probably be filled with danger. He retracted his gaze and took a look at Nan Gonglin, who was following closely beside him as he pursed his lips and transmitted his voice solemnly through the mercenary group badge. Feng Ru, you're still poisoned, so if you meet with any danger later, you don't need to care about anything else. Just help me take good care of Lin or will do. Yi Feng Ru frowned as his vision swept past the timid Nan Gonglin. I will take care of Linner, but I'm poisoned doesn't mean that I'm useless. Up till now, no one has ever come out alive from the bottom of the Ling King's tomb, but we've walked till now, and just like what the World Group's vice group leader said, we're about to reach the array protecting the King Corpse. This meant that they were not far from the main tomb of the Ling King. This also meant that this was the lowest level of the tomb. Just as he finished his words, a dissatisfied expression surfaced on Zi Qianqian's beautiful face. Leader, the World Group is merely a bronze plate mercenary group that's slightly prepared for King Ling's tomb. You really believe that woman's words? Qianqian. Nangong feared and frowned and glanced at Zi Qianqian with displeasure. He knew his deputy leader's character very well, so he didn't say much. It's always good to be careful. I hope the Death God mercenary group can guarantee the glory of its own gold medal. Both groups were saying the same thing to their own teams. The environment in front of him had changed. The long and deep tunnel turned into 5 narrow paths. There was also a black coffin placed on each of the paths. Coffin, everyone's expressions had a huge change. Nangong Firen's heart sunk. Indeed, we've really reached the array protecting the King Corpse. Chapter 8:19. These words were extremely domineering. Yi Qing Luo's expression was indifferent as her frosty eyes squinted slightly as she continued. In the ancient tomb, there are many things which feed on something from the human body, for example, blood, essence, flesh. Pausing, her lips curled upwards slightly. Under such circumstances, when they saw such a strange smile, everyone couldn't help but shuddered. Even though the one smiling was a peerless beauty that could topple cities, everyone still felt terrified. Nangong Lin was so frightened that her face turned pale as tears streamed down as she buried her head in her brother's arms, not daring to cry out. Nangong Firen's brows creased tightly as he gazed deeply at Yi Qing Luo. as a glint flashed past his eyes. Earlier, when Yi Qing Luo made a move on Nangong Lin, it wasn't because she wanted to kill her, but she was certain that as her brother, he wouldn't just stand by and watch. If he hadn't carried Nangong Lin away in time, then these corpse worms would have completely swallowed Nangong Lin. Many thanks. Nangong Firen wasn't the kind of idiot who couldn't differentiate right from wrong as he directly jumped out these two words towards Yi Qing Luo. There are probably less than 5 people in this world who could receive Nangong Firen's thanks personally. To the others, this was considered a huge honor. But Yi Qing Luo didn't reveal much emotions towards his gratitude as she spoke calmly. There are a lot of corpse worms here, so I believe there should be some corpses which are used to feed them. There's a possibility that we have already reached the vicinity of the array which protects the king corpse. For those corpses which had died for hundreds of years and were only left with white bones, it wasn't possible to condense so many corpse worms. To be able to condense 100 over corpse worms was already considered as the maximum. Yi Qing Luo looked at those Azura god group's mercenaries whose faces were filled with astonishment. Come over. Those mercenaries stared intently at the place which Nangong Lin was sitting on earlier, as the corpse worms surged densely, not daring to move at all. Yi Qing Luo's eyes turned slightly cold. Since you're not willing to come over, then continue to stay there. Saying that, she raised her hand. Nangong Firen hugged Nangong Lin tightly as he borrowed the force from the rock walls to swiftly leap over to the world group's side. Immediately following that, Zi Qianqian, Yi Fengru, and Wei Beilai also jumped over to the world group's side. The other mercenaries naturally obeyed their leader's orders. When the last Azura god group's mercenary group stood still, he saw Yi Qing Luo's 5 fingers moving. Nangong Firen and the others then realized that what Yi Qing Luo was holding in her hands was a ball-shaped lamp oil. With a flick of her finger, the oil lamp immediately burst into flames. Yi Qing Luo casually threw it towards the direction where those worms were surging. With a bang, the lamp was fried, and the flame instantly spread over those worms. The flame surged, elongating everyone's shadows. However, when the fire burned, the crowd did not feel the slightest bit of warmth. Instead, they felt that it was getting colder and colder. Thick smoke billowed and filled the long tunnel. Everyone's eyes were a little dry from the smoke. Let's go. Yi Qing Luo looked at those worms which were engulfed by the flames, as her tightly knitted brows had yet to ease up. She turned around and left, and the others naturally followed suit. Long Yinzhan walked beside Yi Qing Luo, and when he saw Yi Qing Luo's frowning expression, he bent down slightly as he inquired softly, "What's the matter?" Yi Qing Luo went silent for a moment as she transmitted her voice through the mercenary group badge. Somehow, I feel that after we entered the tomb today, everything that happened is very strange. Somehow, I feel something is not right. Chapter 821. 5 coffins as black as ink, without any other colors. The most attractive thing was the extremely complicated patterns carved on the top of the coffins. Looking closely, those patterns weren't totems, but a strange array. These 5 coffins are not the real corpse king. Yi Qing Luo stopped in her tracks as her gaze swept past the 5 small paths. 5 corpse guard king, king guard tomb king. This was the 8 words mantra which was passed down from the tomb king's main tomb. In these 5 coffins, there were 5 corpse puppets. Initially, when the corpse puppets set up the array, the only instruction they received was to guard the corpse king, to stop any intruders who went near the corpse king. After the 5 corpse puppets, it was the real corpse king. After Yi Qing Luo saw the 5 coffins, her slender brows creased tightly. Their mission was to carry the coffins of the corpse king back. To carry the corpse king away, it was necessary to subdue these 5 corpse puppets. Furthermore, the guard king corpse might not be obedient enough to let her carry it away. This was an especially thorny task. Even if they reached the corpse king's array unscathed, this mission, they might not be able to complete it. Didn't you say, since we're already here, we should at least give it a try? Long Yinzhan stood by her side. as his voice was deep. Yiqing Luo heaved a long sigh as her long eyelashes fluttered as she gazed at the 5 coffins in front. Yes, we're already here. There's no reason to give up just because we're not feeling well. But when he said it, his tone was unusually heavy. Not knowing why, Yiqing Luo had an inexplicable feeling of fluster. The profound jade heart that was surging in his chest was also unceasingly emitting a kind of warning intent. DMO Xian had only left for a day. By right, this profound jade heart, which was formed by DMO Xian, shouldn't have such a huge reaction. Last, do you feel it? In her mind, Old Man Song's voice suddenly rang. Yiqing Luo was slightly stunned. As her heart sunk, Old Man Song, what's going on? There are several reasons why your profound jade heart is acting strangely. Currently, the closest reason is that your own strength has surpassed the level of the profound jade heart that DMO Xian forged for you. As a result, this profound jade heart is unable to withstand your own strength. To put it bluntly, it also meant that Yiqing Luo's strength was increasing day by day. This profound heart jade that DMO Xian had formed for Yiqing Luo was unable to withstand her strength. Especially when Yiqing Luo was in King Ling's tomb. The sense of danger caused the energy stored within Yiqing Luo's body to expand continuously, causing her profound jade heart to be unable to take it. Yiqing Luo pursed her pink lips as her fair little hand covered her own heart, feeling the incessant impact of the scorching heat. After a while, she said bitterly, "What else?" Also, Old Man Song's voice paused, and he sighed. "In your heart, don't you already have an answer?" Yiqing Luo's face turned slightly pale as she lowered her eyelids. Indeed, she already had an answer in her heart. He just didn't want to admit this answer. But hearing Old Man Song's tone, it also meant that her thoughts were not wrong. There was another possibility that something had happened to the mother profound jade heart, which had formed this son profound jade heart. This thought flashed past her mind, but was directly rejected by Yiqing Luo. Who was DMO Xian? The Overlord who was invincible in this world. How could something possibly happen? Yiqing Luo's slender fingers slightly curled up. While her thoughts were in a trance, there was a small conflict over at the Azura group's side. Nangong Lin was making a fuss about wanting to go home. Under the push, Yiqing Luo's body was pushed forward a few steps. Chapter 822. Everyone's hair stood on end as their calves trembled and their entire bodies trembled. The raging wind swept up the shattered stones on the ground as it flew in all directions. Their ears were filled with an ear-piercing howl of the wind, mixed with the shattered stones rolling onto the ground as the explosion sounds were heard. A gust of chilly air speedily spread in the tunnel. Bam, 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 bam. A series of collisions were heard, and the 5 black coffin lids, which were placed quietly on the 5 small paths, all bounced open at the same time. 5 black coffin lids crossed each other in midair, and, after drawing a few cold arcs, it directly leaned against the side of the coffins. Following that, 5 corpse puppets bounced out from the 5 open coffins. 5 corpse puppets stood stiffly at the front of the coffins, as though they were wooden puppets which were hung in midair, without any signs of life. They were dressed in black loose robes, and their entire heads were shrouded in the black robes, so their faces couldn't be seen. Corpse puppets. Corpse puppets. 5 high-leveled corpse puppets. Ghost. Ghost. We're dead meat. 5 high-leveled corpse puppets have been awakened. The Death God mercenary groups, mercenaries all shrunk backwards, as no one was willing to stand at the forefront. And when they saw Yiqing Luo standing on that small path, they couldn't help but burst out curses. The World Group. Are you trying to get us killed? You obviously know the terror of the 5 corpses and still want to alarm them. These mercenaries, because Yiqing Luo had struck their pride several times, putting on a high and mighty look, they had long been dissatisfied with Yiqing Luo. Now that they saw Yiqing Luo alarmed the 5 high-leveled corpse puppets, their belly full of terror, and terror exploded at this instance. The World Group's vice group leader, what's the matter with you? Once the 5 corpses are alarmed, they will kill all the intruders before they stop. Do you want us to die with you? One person opened his mouth, and one after another people started to open their mouths. But when Yiqing Luo turned her eyes sideways and stared coldly at them, everyone's voices seemed to be stuck in their throats, not able to say a single word. Her ravishing looks seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. Her long, narrow, and bewitching eyes shot out a piercingly cold light. It was as if being swept by her gaze would make one feel as if they were in an ice house, especially with the 5 corpse puppets in the background. This killing gaze swept over and successfully silenced the clamoring mercenaries. Yiqing Luo stood on that small path, not moving at all. After making those people shut up, she turned around and stared indifferently at the 5 corpse puppets standing upright in the coffins. Her tone was calm, and no one could tell what she was feeling. The deal between the Killing God group and me is to assist the World group to complete the Mercenary Association's mission. After the members of the Azura group heard this, they were so nervous that they had difficulty breathing. His throat felt like it was being choked by something, and it was extremely uncomfortable. Complete the Mercenary Union's mission? Bring back the coffin of the Guardian Zombie King? How could this be possible? Don't joke around. Nangong Lin shivered in Nangong Firen's arms. Corpse puppets. Those are corpse puppets. Don't tell me you want to defeat these corpse puppets? Towards the terror of the corpse puppets, she more or less understood from the mutterings of the Azura group's mercenaries. It was undoubtedly like striking a rock with an egg. No matter if we want or not, we have no way out now. Yiqing Luo's expression was calm as she calmly opened her mouth. The corpse puppets were alarmed, which indicated that the corpse puppet array had been activated. If there was still a trace of living aura in the tomb, these corpse puppets would not return to their coffins to sleep again. Chapter 823. I want to go home. Brother, I want to go home. She's a lunatic. Nangong Lin's chest was in pain as she bit her lower lip tightly. She was so scared that her tears kept flowing out. Nangong Firen frowned as she exchanged glances with the other vice group leaders. She could see the helplessness in each other's eyes, just as what Yiqing Luo said. No matter whether they wanted to defeat these 5 corpse puppets, they had no other way out. Once the corpse puppets were alarmed, none of them would be able to escape. Only by giving it their all would they have a chance to survive. If it wasn't for her overestimating herself, we wouldn't have ended up in such a state. Zi Qianqian's beautiful face surfaced a trace of sullen anger. She really thinks that she's so powerful, putting on a look of a senior to lecture us. In the end, it's because they don't have the ability to make sufficient preparations before taking on the mission. Those who have the ability, no matter where they go, will not be a problem. Qianqian. Nangong Firen shook her head at Zi Qianqian. Am I wrong? Zi Qianqian gave a cold harumph. If she really has the ability, she wouldn't have used her second brother's life to threaten us. Nangong Firen's brows were tightly knitted into a bundle. Zi Qianqian's words weren't without reason. But Nangong Firen still felt that the World Group's cautious attitude was indeed what their Azura group lacked. Looking at Zi Qianqian's fairy-like face, which was obviously filled with disgust and arrogance, Nangong Firen could still see the jealousy towards Yiqing Luo in the depths of her eyes. Jealousy, yes. How could she not be jealous? All along, Zi Qianqian was hailed as the genius among the geniuses. She had an enviable, profound jade heart, and her cultivation speed was extraordinary, no matter if it was beauty, ability, or intellect. Zi Qianqian was forever high up and was hailed as Fairy Qianqian. Yiqing Luo's appearance was enough to make Zi Qianqian feel a sense of crisis. But now, Nangong Firen had no intention to delve into this issue with Zi Qianqian at this juncture. She only replied calmly, "Let's talk about this after we leave the tomb." Yiqing Luo stood stiffly on the spot as she squinted her eyes at the 5 corpse puppets. Her mind was searching for ways to deal with the corpse puppets. She could not move. The 5 corpse formation had already been activated. Now, as long as she took a slight step forward, the 5 corpse puppets would definitely jump up at the same time. Once they left the coffins, this fierce battle would begin. Little girl, An old voice sounded extremely clear and spacious in this silent tunnel. Among the world group, an old man dressed in a white brocade robe and dressed like a nouveau riche slowly climbed down from the back of a mercenary from the world group. As if he had just woken up, he stroked his messy white hair and yawned. "Not bad, little girl. You've reached the bottom of the tomb so quickly. Not bad, not bad. You're much faster than I expected." The appearance of the old man caused the gazes of the 100 or so mercenaries to focus on him. The world group, are you guys crazy? Why did you bring your grandfather to this kind of place? When Nangong Lin saw Holy Pirate, her face changed. She pointed at Holy Pirate angrily. "Do you think Ling King's tomb is a scenic spot? Do you think you can go sightseeing?" This was originally an extremely dangerous situation. An additional person who didn't even have the strength to trust a chicken meant that they had an additional burden. There's a possibility that it would lead to their total annihilation. The world group's youngsters frowned tightly as they stared at Nangong Lin unhappily. Right now, she was the biggest burden, okay? And she didn't even know it. Chapter 824. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as her charming eyes were like frost as she cried out sharply, "Shut up! Now is not the time to quarrel. Gather your spirits and get into formation to defend." The world group's mercenaries retracted the thoughts in their eyes as they speedily got into formation, listening to Yiqing Luo's instructions. Nangong Firen grabbed Nangong Lin's arm as he pushed her into Yifeng Ru's arms and immediately gave a stern command. God-slaying mercenary group, fully cooperate with the world mercenary group. That command was given, and although those mercenaries were dissatisfied, but they didn't show it out. As a mercenary, the most important condition was to obey all instructions. The two groups of people were already in position to prepare for battle. Yiqing Luo half narrowed her eyes as she glanced sideways at God Thief, who was standing by the side with a satisfied expression. "Come over here." God Thief was still stretching his waist when he heard Yiqing Luo's words, and in a blink of an eye, he had already appeared in front of her. Towards this kind of gloomy place, God Thief was already used to it. Not to mention that he had been imprisoned in the underground prison for 10 years, living in darkness, gloomy days. Even if he hadn't gone to Death God Castle before he was imprisoned, he had been to places like tombs quite a number of times. The current God Thief walked towards Yiqing Luo with a calm expression. Standing by the side of the 5 small paths, God Thief dug his ears. "Young lady, you need my help so soon? What weaknesses does the corpse puppet have?" Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes at him. She wasn't in the mood to joke around with him. God Thief scratched the back of his head as his face was still sloppy with an indifferent expression. But when he opened his mouth, he was extremely serious. These 5 corpse puppets were created by the combined efforts of the 4 sect masters 1,000 years ago. During the process of creation, they absorbed the heaven and earth's yin qi and the graveyard's grievance to form them, so they belong to the high-grade corpse puppets. Yiqing Luo was very clear about this point as she nodded her head and didn't say a word. After 1,000 years, these corpse puppets are only left with a set of skeletons. If they want to regain their human form, they will need to absorb living creatures, and after they merge with the living creatures, they will be able to take on the appearance of the merged living creatures. Because of this, the minute these corpse puppets moved, they would try their best to snatch the living creatures to merge with them. The corpse puppets have weaknesses, but the high-grade corpse puppets refined by the 4 great sect masters have no weaknesses. Holy Pirate stroked his white beard and gently sighed. He shook his head and said, "Normal corpse puppets, if they do not absorb yin energy or spirits, cannot use the body of a corpse puppet to continue living. To deal with normal corpse puppets, we just need to stop them from absorbing yin energy or spirits." But these 5 high-level corpse puppets have already guarded the tomb of the Ling King for 1,000 years. In addition to the endless stream of profound practitioners, grave robbers, and the other profound practitioners who have been sending over the past 1,000 years, they have long since nourished them to the point where, even after another 1,000 years, they will still be able to continue living. Holy Pirate's voice was not loud, but it traveled clearly into everyone's ears in the silent grave. Nangong Firen's expression darkened. Zi Qianqian and Wei Beilai had already transmitted their voices through the mercenary group's badges, thinking about retreating quickly. However, this thought had just left his mouth. Yi Fengru, who had been holding Nangong Lin's waist, suddenly turned pale. His body twitched, and he collapsed. His back was against the rock wall behind him, as his 5 fingers clasped in the direction of his heart. That intense pain which started to expand after his heart was pricked by needles attacked him once again. 2 hours had passed. The poison in Yi Fengru's body acted up again in an instant. Zi Qianqian's beautiful brows creased tightly as she half squatted down to support Yi Fengru. A sliver of hatred flashed past her eyes. They had no choice but to retreat. Chapter 825. Yiqing Luo shot a cold glance, and her fingertips moved as she fished out a medicinal pill. I can't move now. Come over to take the medicine. The current Yiqing Luo was equivalent to a mechanism. The minute it was activated, those 5 advanced leveled corpse puppets would pounce towards them without any hesitation. Zi Qianqian was about to head over, but Yi Fengru held her hand tightly as his expression was filled with pain as he couldn't help but moan in pain. I'll go. Nangong Lin looked at Yi Fengru with heartache as she anxiously rushed over. Dashing in front of Yiqing Luo, Nangong Lin grabbed her wrist as she barbarically pulled the medicinal pill out from her hand. Following that, she pushed Yiqing Luo harshly as she turned around and ran towards Yi Fengru. Your mother. Nangong Lin, are you King sick? Yiqing Luo's expression changed drastically as an unconcealable rage surged in her chest. Damn it, don't be afraid of a godlike opponent, only afraid of a pig-like teammate. This Nangong Lin was simply the representative of God among the pig-like teammates. Yiqing Luo had just finished howling when the entire tomb suddenly gave off a loud sound as the ground started to shake continuously. Immediately following that, those 5 upright corpse puppets gave off a mournful howl. The sound traveled extremely far as wave after wave, irritating one's eardrums. Large pieces of rubble from the rock wall continued to fall. Some of them crashed onto the mercenaries' heads, causing a wound as their heads were filled with blood. Due to the fact that they had seen the corpse worms earlier, these mercenaries immediately took out the medicinal powder to stop the bleeding as they carelessly applied it onto their wounds. A thin layer of green mist, visible to the naked eye, gradually spread out in the tomb. The 2 groups of mercenary groups stared blankly at the front, at those 5 corpse puppets which had their hands stretched out facing the top of the tomb. That thin green weapon was being sucked into their bodies at an extremely fast speed. The world group, quickly retreat. Yiqing Luo shouted out sharply as she grabbed onto the lazy god thief as she speedily moved backwards. The world group's mercenaries subconsciously obeyed her command as they followed Yiqing Luo to retreat. At the same time, those 5 corpse puppets leapt upwards as they speedily attacked towards their direction. Help! There were a few screams. Before the Death God mercenary group could react, the few elite mercenaries standing at the front had already been captured by the corpse puppets. The luminous pearl shone brightly. Everyone could clearly see that the mercenary's hand was a piece of white bone. No one would be able to remain calm when they saw a person being pinned down by a few bones. In particular, after White Bones tightened its grip on the mercenaries, it didn't even take 10 breaths for the green mist to envelop the captive mercenaries. All that was left of the captive mercenaries were one by one. It was directly absorbed by these corpse puppets. In just a few breaths, the Death God mercenary group had lost 8 mercenaries who had fallen from the outside and were injured. Go! Nangong Firen's expression changed drastically as he silently scolded Yiqing Luo for not informing them first, as he immediately asked his group members to leave with Yiqing Luo. However, he did not dare to show his anger on the surface. After all, it was Nangong Lin who caused the 5 high-level corpse puppets to react. Nangong Firen regretted bringing her willful younger sister with her today. Noticing her own brother's gaze, as well as the death god mercenary group's reproachful gazes towards her, Nangong Lin pouted her lips aggrievedly as she sobbed. I didn't do it on purpose. She only hated Yi Qing Luo and casually gave her push. Who knew? Who knew that it would cause such an outcome? Chapter 826. Big Brother. No. Nangong Lin's expression changed drastically. Her face was filled with grievance and shock. If her father found out about her performance in the tomb, her days in the future would definitely not be so peaceful. However, looking at Nangong Firen's determined expression, Nangong Lin could only swallow her words. In his heart, he hated Yi Qing Luo even more. If it wasn't for Yi Qing Luo, the Death God mercenary group wouldn't have reached the bottom of the tomb. The mercenaries that her brother had spent so much effort to train wouldn't die either. She would not be blamed by her brother. He would not let his father know about this. It was obvious that Nangong Lin had forgotten about it. Everything that had happened in King Ling's tomb was because Yi Fengru wanted to snatch the profound phoenix ring. Hence he had provoked Yi Qing Luo first. Yi Qing Luo and the others fled extremely swiftly, and not too long later, they had already reached the place where they had set fire to those worms. Behind him, the miserable cries of the god-slaying mercenary group could be heard. Yi Qing Luo didn't turn back, and neither did anyone in the world group. The fire in front of him didn't go out just because the insect carcass was burned to death. Instead, it continued to burn, and the flames rose higher and higher, as if it was going to burn the entire tomb. Nangong Firen saw the flickering flames from afar. Zi Qianqian's beautiful face was covered with anger. What a good fire! There was a raging inferno in front and a corpse puppet behind. We will all die here today. This fire was started by Yi Qing Luo. Zi Qianqian naturally vented his anger on Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo couldn't be bothered, but Kitty Li, who had been following beside Yi Qing Luo, couldn't take it. Kitty Li turned her head and made a funny face at Zi Qianqian. If it wasn't for this fire, you would have been swallowed by the corpse worms just now. Would you even have a chance to talk here? You. Zi Qianqian gritted his teeth as a trace of anger flashed through his eyes. Kitty Li snorted and shook her head, ignoring Zi Qianqian. The corpse puppet behind him was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had already caught up. Wherever it passed, the rock walls and gravel cracked. If their legs were any slower, they would be completely absorbed by the corpse puppets. The feather fan in Yi Qing Luo's hand shook and shot out a strand of silver thread, directly piercing into the crevice of the rock wall. She tugged, and after confirming her strength, she leaped. The thin silver threads reflected a cold glint. Following Yi Qing Luo's strength, the silver wire continued to sway, and the place where the silver wire was fixed gave out a creaking sound of crushed stones. Yi Qing Luo borrowed the strength from the surrounding rock walls and the silver wires to swiftly pass through the burning flames. Soon after, a few silver threads pierced into the rock wall one by one. The youngsters in the mercenary group didn't say a word as they followed behind. Yi Qing Luo speedily passed the flames. The world group. You guys? Wei Beilai immediately panicked. He quickly walked forward, wanting to snatch a silver wire. But before he could step forward, he was pushed aside by the world group's youngsters. In a blink of an eye, 90 over mercenaries from the world group had already arrived at the other end of the flames. The 5 corpse puppets had already caught up. Sharp and ear-piercing corpse howls resounded. Nangong Firen threw Nangong Lin to Yi Fengru and pushed them toward the silver threads. Then, he drew his long sword and leaped into the midst of the corpse puppets to attract their attention. Brother. Nangong Lin's face turned pale as she cried out in fear. Before she could struggle to chase after Nangong Firen, her body suddenly felt light as Yi Fengru brought her along and climbed onto one of the silver threads. Zi Qianqian and the others tugged on the silver threads. Seeing that it was as thin as hair, they had some doubts in their hearts. But they used a little more strength to ascertain that it was able to withstand their weight. One by one, they swiftly passed through the fire. There were a few mercenaries who were too anxious and almost fell into the fire. When the last surviving mercenary landed steadily in the middle of the bonfire, Roland's eyes lit up. Chapter 827. Nangong Firen's profound rank was above the earth profound rank. In the Nirvana realm, he could be considered a high-level profound practitioner at his age. However, he was completely powerless against the 5 corpse puppets with just this bit of ability. The only reason he could hold on for such a long time was because of the long sword in his hand. The long sword should be a weapon above the supreme level and had been stained with the aura of talismans. When the sword swept past the corpse puppets, they would subconsciously avoid the longsword's attack. When the longsword slashed the black robe of one of the corpse puppets, the black robe immediately emitted a puff of green smoke, revealing half of the white bone under the black robe. However, even with the protection of the longsword, it was hard for him to avoid being injured by the 5 corpse puppets by himself when fighting them alone. After the last mercenary crossed the bonfire, he had just heaved a sigh of relief when his arm was cut by the white bone of one of the corpse puppets. Nangong Firen moved quickly. Enduring the sharp pain of his arm being corroded, he raised his sword and swung it. The corpse puppet quickly retracted its white bone. The fragrance of human blood wafted from the corroded arm. The other 4 corpse puppets howled crazily, and a bloodthirsty red light flashed under their black robes. They swarmed toward Nangong Firen in unison. Nangong Firen's heart sank. He glanced sideways at his bleeding arm and vaguely saw his white bone. A chilly inchi spread from the wound on his arm to his body. As the corpse puppets approached, Nangong Firen wanted to raise his sword to repel them. However, the chilly inchi made him feel cold all over, and his fingers holding the long sword stiffened. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move his arm. The increasingly intense inchi was assaulting his face. Nangong Firen closed his eyes in despair. Forget it. It's worth it if I can let my brother survive by sacrificing myself. At this moment, he suddenly felt a grip on his arm. Nangong Firen felt as if something had wrapped around his body. His body suddenly became light, and he was pulled by a force. Big brother. Nangong Lin's sobbing voice rang in his ears. Immediately after, a pair of ice-cold hands directly grabbed his arm. The woman's cold voice rang out, "Don't touch him. Get out of the way." Nangong Firen opened her eyes and saw a pair of emotionless eyes. Those eyes were pitch black and bright, like the resplendent stars in the sky. The corners of his eyes were long and narrow, revealing an extremely enchanting and evil charm. As it spun, it gave off a dazzling flowing light. The streak of light shot into Nangong Firen's heart. For some unknown reason, his heart was beating rapidly, uncontrollably. Even his breathing became stagnant. "Don't you dare touch my brother. You wicked woman. You could have used these silver threads to pull my brother over, but you had to wait until he was injured and on the verge of death before bringing him over. You're trying to kill my brother." Nangong Lin cried and hugged Nangong Firen's waist tightly. Her tearful eyes stared at the corroded wound on his arm with fear, and her tears fell even harder. Yiqing Luo didn't have such a good temper. At this juncture, she still allowed her to throw a little tantrum. Yiqing Luo directly clasped Nangong Lin's shoulder and easily pulled her up, throwing her towards Yi Fengru's direction. "If I had pulled your brother over earlier, your brother's intention of using his own life to fight for time for you to escape would have been wasted." Yiqing Luo's tone was icy cold. As her ridiculing gaze swept past the Azura god group's mercenaries were standing by the side with lingering fear, as her lips curled into a cold arc. Chapter 828. When the death god group's mercenaries heard that, their faces flushed red as they lowered their eyelids in guilt. Earlier, when their lives were on the line, all they were thinking about was how to survive. They had sufficient time to use the silver thread to cross that pile of raging fire, because their group leader had sacrificed his own life to fight for time for them. Luckily, Yiqing Luo made a move at the last moment. Yiqing Luo didn't have the leisure to watch the Death God mercenary group put on a show of brotherly love. She directly took out a medicine bottle and threw it into Zi Chanqian's hands as she commanded in a deep voice, The smell of blood not only stimulates the corpse puppets, it will also attract the corpse worms, help him stop the bleeding, and expel the corpse chi that has entered his body after avoiding the corpse puppets. Zi Qianqian caught the medicine bottle as her slender brows creased tightly, not liking Yi Qing Luo's commanding tone. Just as she was about to retort, she saw Yi Qing Luo turning her head over, and the red feather fan in her hands seemed to have merged into one with the raging fire, dancing in joy on her slender, jade-like fingertips. Those few silver threads which were inserted into the rock wall speedily retracted back into the feather fan. Zi Qianqian's words could only be kept in her throat. Clenching her teeth, she squatted down and started to bandage Nangong Firen's wound to stop the bleeding. Those 5 corpse puppets saw all their targets and had already crossed that ball of raging fire as they howled and charged over. Yi Qing Luo used the silver threads to swiftly weave a 5-elemental enchantment on both sides of the rock wall. Following that, she took out a round oil lamp and threw it into that pile of fire as she shouted at the same time, "Run!" Although Yi Qing Luo was only a Copperplate Mercenary Group's vice group leader. But at this moment, she had already become everyone's backbone. Yi Qing Luo gave her command, and everyone speedily turned around and ran without any hesitation. 5 corpse puppets flew forward, and 5 skeletons crashed against the silver threads which had formed the enchantment, blocking them. The corpse puppets howled a few times as their ghastly white bones directly grabbed onto the silver threads. Coincidentally, the round oil lamp which Yi Qing Luo threw entered the pile of fire. With a rub, the fire surged and directly burned to the highest point of the rock wall. The endless flames swallowed the 5 corpse puppets. After Yi Qing Luo threw the oil lamp, she immediately turned around and displayed her smooth footwork, speedily chasing up to the others. Seeing Yi Qing Luo following up, Long Yunzhan and the others who were running at the back were relieved. "Is he dead?" Xiao Jin turned his head over and asked Yi Qing Luo. The other mercenaries strained their ears to listen as they ran. Yi Qing Luo shook her head lightly. High-level corpse puppets aren't afraid of ordinary flames burning. God Thief said this before. This kind of high-level corpse puppets have no weaknesses at all. Then what should we do? A trace of fear appeared on Wei Bei's handsome face, and his voice trembled uncontrollably. Are we really going to die here today? As an executive group leader, every word you say is related to the mercenaries' psychological state changes. Yi Qing Luo didn't answer his question directly, but sneered and blamed him expressionlessly. Yi Qing Luo didn't answer his question directly, but sneered and blamed him expressionlessly. Wei Bailey's face darkened, and he immediately shut his mouth. This woman was indeed smart and capable, but his mouth and his arrogant attitude was really annoying. Yi Qing Luo didn't care about unimportant people's thoughts. She retracted her thoughts as her gaze searched around for a way to avoid the corpse puppets. If they were chased by the corpse puppets, they would appear extremely passive. There was no preparation or chance for them to counterattack. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath as her mind kept replaying the places which they had passed by along the way. Even the details of the gravel, vines, and moss were clearly reflected in his mind. Chapter 829. The place which Yi Qing Luo had chosen was exactly that stone wall which had Duke Ling's totem. The head of King Ling on the stone wall was the mechanism of the stone wall. As long as he grasped this, he would have enough time to expel the corpse chi from Nangong Firen's body. The group sprinted all the way, and before long, they arrived at the stone wall. Yi Qing Luo asked the mercenaries to return to the middle layer of King Ling's tomb, and when she turned her head to take a look, she didn't see any corpse puppets chasing after them. She let out a sigh of relief. High-level corpse puppets were not afraid of fire. However, the corpse puppets were still affected. At the very least, the 5 corpse puppets would not be able to break free from the burning flames for a while. Yi Qing Luo was the last to cross over the stone wall, as she speedily pressed on the stone wall. Another deafening rumbling sound rang out, and the stone door that had been opened slowly closed. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. At this moment, he couldn't care less about the slippery vines and the moss that made his hair stand on end. Zi Qianqian helped Nangong Firen to sit against the rock wall. Yiqing Luo didn't waste any time as she walked straight to Nangong Firen's side and squatted down as she pulled up his arm, which had been corroded by the corpse puppet. It felt extremely cold to the touch. The slightest touch was like touching ice. It was bone-chilling. Yiqing Luo's expression turned grave as she carefully sized up Nangong Firen's face. Nangong Firen closed her eyes tightly. A thin layer of cold air seeped out of her forehead, and her eyelashes were covered with a layer of white frost. The corners of his eyes were already covered with a patch of greenish-black. The situation was more serious than he had imagined. "Lass, you have to expel the corpse chi for him as soon as possible." Old Man Song's urging voice rang in his ears. "If the corpse aura pervades his heart and corrodes his profound heart jade, then he'll be hopeless." Yiqing Luo took a deep breath. As for the method to expel corpse chi, she had never dabbled in it. It was just that when he was reading the information about the Ling King's tomb last night, he had also thought about the problem of corpse chi. At that time, he only asked Old Man Song about a simple method to prevent the corpse chi from entering his body, but he didn't delve too deeply into it. At this moment, she could only listen to Old Man Song's instructions. Yiqing Luo flipped her palm, and the red feather fan slid into her palm. She gripped the fan handle tightly, and with a flick of her finger, a sharp dagger slid out. She lifted Nangong Firen's arm and was about to cut his wound with the dagger. However, Zi Qianqian grabbed his arm. "What are you doing? Let go." Yiqing Luo knitted her brows and looked at her coldly with a displeased expression. "I really doubt the real strength of the gold medal mercenary group." Her tone was full of disdain and mockery. "Ever since we entered the tomb of the Ling King, your death god mercenary group has caused trouble time and time again. You've dragged down our operation and become a burden on me." "You? What did you say?" Zi Qianqian was so angry that her beautiful face turned red. Her pair of cold eyes were filled with anger. Yiqing Luo gave a light humph. "What I'm saying, you know it clearly in your hearts. If I had known that you were a bunch of trash, I would never have signed that deal with you." These words were completely undisguised disdain for the god-slaying mercenary group. The World Mercenary Group's mercenaries were secretly delighted. They all gave their vice group leaders' words 32 big thumbs up in their hearts. From the start to the end, the god-slaying mercenary group had always placed themselves in a high and mighty position, as though accompanying them into the bottom level of the Ling King's tomb was a condescending act. But in actual fact, the god-slaying mercenary group's performance was totally an existence of a burden. Not only did they not have any practical use, they even kept on creating trouble, which caused people to die one after another. Chapter 830. The underlying meaning was that if Zi Qianqian still wanted to stir up any trouble, she wouldn't bother about the death god mercenary group's life or death. Zi Qianqian's back instantly felt a chill, and when he met Yiqing Luo's long and narrow eyes, he felt as though something was strangling his neck, making it hard for him to breathe. Perhaps it was Yiqing Luo's words which made Zi Qianqian sense the seriousness of the situation. Or perhaps it was Yiqing Luo's imposing manner which suppressed Zi Qianqian so much that he had no way to resist. Zi Qianqian's hand stiffly released Yiqing Luo's wrist as he took half a step back. The expression on his beautiful face was congealed and stiff. Yiqing Luo retracted her gaze as the blade speedily cut the wound on Nangong Firen's arm, which had already stopped bleeding. The medicinal powder which stopped the bleeding was swiftly dissolved and cleaned up. The wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. Yiqing Luo's expression didn't change as she directly cut the wound even bigger. Blood started to gush out immediately. The death god mercenary group's mercenaries' hearts were filled with terror. Wandering on the blade's edge for several decades, they had experienced all sorts of dangerous missions. But they had never done such a strange mission. They could kill any demon, magical beast, or mirage beast without any expression. But unfortunately, This time round, they were facing a ghost. For these mercenaries to reach their current position, whose hands weren't stained with blood. Naturally, he was extremely afraid of this kind of thing, especially the fear which the corpse puppets and worms brought to them had already seeped deep into their bones. Looking at Yi Qing Luo's agile actions, no one went up to stop her. At this moment, Long Yunzhan's icy-cold eyes swept past everyone without any warmth as he spoke calmly. "Do a head count." Xiao Jin and the others responded and started to count the number of people. After around half an instance's time, the few of them counted the number of people. The World Mercenary Group has a total of 96 people who entered King Ling's tomb. Currently, there are 96 people left, and 3 of them have some external injuries. Death God Mercenary Group has a total of 37 people who entered King Ling's tomb. Currently, there are 13 people left and 5 injured. When a head count was done, the Death God Mercenary Group's mercenaries' faces flushed red. Even Zi Qianqian, who had his eyes on top of his head, had unnaturally shifted his vision away, embarrassed to look at the World Mercenary Group. From the data, it could be seen who was the real lousy teammate. Long Yunzhan did not use these numbers to speak. He continued coldly. Take advantage of this opportunity to properly nurse your body and strength. Right now, I can't be sure how long this stone wall can stop those corpse puppets. If a battle really breaks out later, you can only rely on yourself. It was rare for Long Yunzhan to speak for such a long time, so the World Group's mercenaries immediately responded in unison. On the Azure Group's side, they looked at each other. Finally, under Yi Fengru's signal, they all sat cross-legged on the ground, closed their eyes, and stabilized the chaotic internal force in their bodies. The World Group, on the other hand, took out the prepared rations and water bags from their space pockets, passing them down one by one as they ate the rations in big mouthfuls. The Killing God Group and a dozen other mercenaries smelled the fragrance and immediately opened their eyes. Even in this kind of atmosphere, the ordinary dry rations that they usually disdained to eat seemed especially fragrant at this moment. 10 over mercenaries' stomachs couldn't help but let out a growl in response. They had been guarding the World Group outside the tomb since early in the morning and later on in King Ling's tomb, walking for over 2 hours and having experienced so many hair-raising matters. All their energy had been depleted.